Mana System, Hello, World. By M.J. Markgrove. Chapter 21, Bazaar. We finally made it to our destination. It only took a week longer than expected, a rescue, a death, and a minor beating to get both of us to this place in time. You might as well go meet your contacts so I can complete my mission. Meet me over there, I said, pointing to a brick building across the street. Will 2 hours be enough time? Fiona nodded and entered the bazaar, disappearing in a flash of light as I pulled out the last message spell. Located the bazaar, city is under friendly military control. There are a few black dragons around. Use care while entering the town. The item turned to dust as my message was transmitted. I hoped Frotzar would be safe on his journey. God knows it wasn't an easy trip for us. I kind of hoped Fiona wouldn't show up in 2 hours and I would be off the hook for this life bond. Although, I was starting to see the advantages of having someone to travel with. Before entering the bazaar I decided to see how many credits I had. I hadn't checked my wallet since I met Frotzar. That felt like a lifetime ago, but in reality, it was only 10 days. So much shit happened in that small amount of time. Anyway, I can reflect later. Time to shop. Let's see how many credits I have. My wallet showed that I had 4,584 credits. I let out a low whistle, but in all honesty, I still had very little idea on the value of a credit. I could be rich or I could be poor as shit. Guess it was time to find out. I stepped into the bazaar and for a second my vision went dark, only to be replaced by an enormous sprawling market filled with every conceivable being imaginable. Where do I even start? I mumbled to myself, looking at the sprawling marketplace that went on beyond my sight into the distance. The stalls all looked like temporary structures set up with no rhyme or reason. Each one with its own unique flair and merchant. It was also packed. Species of every size and type mingled about the stalls. Buying and selling everything you could imagine. What I didn't see was guards, at least not at first. Eventually, I spotted certain individuals that stood out. They weren't looking to buy or sell, no, they were watching the people, keeping an eye out for troublemakers. One enterprising individual must have overheard me as I entered and offered to sell me a map of the bazaar for only 10 credits. I decided to turn down his offer, and he lowered his price to 8 credits. I'll give you 3 credits. 5 is the absolute lowest I could go. You won't be disappointed in the quality of the map. I suspected this individual was fleecing me, but I paid him the 5 credits just to get rid of him. He handed me a roughly drawn map that included zones and what they typically sold. What the little shit failed to mention was that these zones changed daily and the map was a few days old. Well, whatever, I thought, wandering to the nearest stall to see what they sold. Turns out it was building blueprints and materials. Not really of any interest to me. A few stalls later I found one of the things I had been looking for. Greetings, what can Horace do for you today? The gruff dwarven man asked me. I'm new to the bazaar, what wares do you sell? Mostly weapons and armor, I also purchase crafting materials for said weapons and armor. Any interest in something like this? I said, pulling one of the chitin scales from my ring. I also set one of the guns down. Horace picked up the piece of chitin, inspecting it with a clinical eye. He tapped it while holding it up to his ear, then he looked at my armor vest. Mind if I take a look at your chest piece? Nope, I said, removing my armor for him to inspect. Quality is low, but the material is interesting, he said, tapping on the interlocking plates. They sound different. Have they been treated in some way or magically enhanced? No, I don't see any telltale signs of magical enhancement. They are rune inscribed, I responded. Rune? The dwarf asked. I took out one of the extra rune inscribed plates for him to look at. He plucked it out of my hand, looking over the symbols I carved into the backside. Fascinating, never seen anything quite like it, reminiscent of magical circles, but there is no mana signature, good for hiding the fact that you are wearing magical armor, Horace mumbled to himself as he inspected my work. Looking up, he asked me a question, is this your work? It is. Would you be able to introduce me to your master? Unfortunately, no, I learned this skill by myself, and as you can see my work is rough at best. The dwarf seemed to be disappointed by this news, handing me back my items. I will purchase the normal plates for a single credit each. If you had been more adept with your skills I would buy the ones you modified. Perhaps when you reach expert rank you can come back and teach me this skill. I could teach you what I know now, I said, not understanding why I had to be an expert. Doesn't work like that, lad, Only experts can impart a crafting skill unless I wish to learn from scratch like you are, and I can't invest that kind of time. I just shrugged. Well, I'm not sure if I want to sell the plates yet, as I feel like I could upgrade my armor. That would be a good idea. It is always cheaper getting materials yourself than buying them from a market or the bazaar, unless those materials are in low demand. He waved the centipede plate at me. This is a low-quality crafting material, so it makes for a good practice medium. You may want to talk with my brother Algar. He sells carving tools. They are designed for wood but should work well for this and other softer materials. He may even have some for carving metal, or if you are really lucky, a magical carving tool. His stall is 5 rows that way, Horace said, pointing to the right. As for your slug thrower, I can give you 10 credits for it. They don't go for much, as you can imagine. Mostly we just melt them down for the raw materials. Thanks, I'll go speak with your brother after this. Here are 2 more guns, I'll take the 30 credits. Can I see a list of weapons, preferably staff? I decided not to keep the rifles, mostly because my accuracy and combatability with them would be quite poor. Not to mention the inability to get more ammo for them. If I picked up more guns along the way, I might use them, at least until I reached a market. Horace cleared the guns from the table with a wave and they disappeared into a storage device. The money entered my wallet and then a screen appeared showing weapons like staves, spears, and pole arms. Prices ranged anywhere from 20 credits up to 2,000, the latter being magically enhanced. I could now see a definite reason to improve my runic crafting if this was how much a decent magical item sold for. I am interested in some of the staves you have for sale, but I need to purchase some other goods first. Will you be here tomorrow? I will. Here, take this, Horace said, handing me a thin metal plate similar to the message scrolls, only with a different design on it that I now understood was a magical circle. I wondered if I could copy the design or effect with runes, something to think about. This will activate a simple locate spell that will show you to my stall. Oh, before I leave, what can you tell me about this? I asked, pulling out the tiny fingernail-sized gem called a mana heart. The reward I got for killing the centipede queen. Horace held out his hand and I dropped the gem in for him to inspect. Ah, a mana heart. They can be used to make any number of magical items. If you're looking to sell it, I can offer you 400 credits for it. No, I think I want to hold on to it to see if I can make something with it. Well, I wish you luck in your crafting. I thanked the merchant and headed down to meet with his brother. After a short discussion with Algar, I purchased 2 sets of tools, one for wood carving and one for metal. This set me back 42 credits, which seemed like a lot, but Algar promised me that they were of excellent quality. He was also able to supply me with a magnifying loupe. After the sale, I asked the man if he could point me to a skill broker. After a bit of face scratching, he said to try and find someone by the name of Victoria. She should be someone in the training district 32 rows over. It took me a good 40 minutes to locate Victoria. Mostly because her stall was tiny, as was she. The pixie lounged in a small hammock behind her tiny shop counter. She greeted me as I walked up. Greetings, traveler, what brings you by Victoria's secret skills today? I couldn't stop myself from laughing when she told me the name of her store, her face starting to redden in anger. Sorry, I am not laughing at you, it's just, my world has a store with the same name and it sells women's undergarments. The little pixie's face went beet red and I wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment or rage, probably a bit of both. Well, I don't sell nonsense like that here, I am one of the finest skill traders in the bazaar, she said in a huff. Sorry, again, I did not mean to offend, it was just odd hearing the name. Anyway, Algar sent me this way, I said, trying to mollify the tiny woman. Humph, fine, I guess if Algar sent you we can do business. Are you looking for a specific skill? Honestly, I don't know, this is my first time visiting the bazaar or buying skills. Okay, what are your goals or areas you wish to shore up that your class lacks? I had to think about this. Right now I lacked ranged damage. I also had an issue if I was not near the ground, as 2 of my main spells would be useless. Something that enhanced my main attack would be nice as well. The first issue I have is closing into melee range. Plenty of skills to accomplish that. What is your main weapon? Staff, I replied. My recommendation would be Blink Step then. While it isn't as fast or instantaneous as some skills, it will enhance the kinetic force of your blows. Sounds good, how much? 1,700 credits. I nearly choked at the cost. It was over a third of my credits. I tried haggling with the tiny woman, but she wouldn't budge on the price. I sighed and transferred the credits and received the skill plate in return. Anything else? The overly happy pixie asked now that she had a large chunk of my money. I would like a skill to enhance my damage. Single target, multi-target, or AoE? She asked, trying to reduce the choices. Again, I had to think. What was my greatest weakness? I had a decent amount of single target abilities, and one very good AoE skill with seismic strike. Maybe instead of getting one good damage skill, I could enhance them all. I wonder. Is there a skill for multicasting the same skill? She smiled. There are a few options, although they are expensive. Both in credits and mana. Have a look, she said, tossing up a system window for me to see. Reversion allows you to recast the same skill on the same target or location. Mana cost is doubled for skill cast. If mana is lacking for the second cast, you will receive skill backlash for double the damage and be unable to utilize said skill for 24 hours. Multicast allows you to reset a skill cooldown up to 2 times for any spell under the level of your intelligence score. Each recast doubles the mana cost of the spell. Recast cost resets after 1 hour. There were more options available, but these two stuck out. At first, reversion sounded like the better option since it had no cap on skill level until you got to the downsides. I asked her what the prices were on both. Reversion is 3,500 credits and multicast is 2,100. I already knew she wouldn't haggle with me on the price. I thought about what I could do with multicast since I couldn't afford reversion anyway. After I mulled over the possibilities, I decided to purchase the skill, adding multicast to my repertoire. With the 75 mana cost of multicast, I was limited at the moment on what spells I could use it with, but that was fine. With my current mana pool, I could double cast Seismic Strike or triple cast Flurry of Blows, although I would need to be wary of that since it would make the spells cost double or more for an hour after. I would need to play with the skill to find out all that I could do with it. I thanked Victoria, deciding to head back to the exit since I had been shopping for well over an hour. I popped out of the bazaar, blinking the disorientation away, and made my way over to our rendezvous point. I noticed Fiona wasn't here yet, so I waited and did some people watching. I made special note of the few black dragons I noticed wandering about the square until I spotted trouble. Walking down the street with 2 flunkies in tow behind her was the Chaos Mage, and to make it worse, Fiona just happened to show up at the same time. Of course, with my luck, the psychotic woman just so happened to spot us, and I recognized one of the men with her as the assassin I scanned earlier. "Shit, we have company," I said to Fiona, nodding my head in the mage woman's direction. Fiona paled when she saw them approaching, gripping the hilt of a new sword tight. Well, if it isn't a dead man and a runaway slave," Charla said, venom in her voice as the other two went to either side, cutting off our retreat. "Get over here, slave, I am going to punish you." When Fiona failed to move, Charla turned her hate-filled glare towards me. "What did you do with my slave?" she demanded. "No slaves here, how about you fuck off," I said back to the woman. I knew it was dangerous to antagonize her here, but that had been my intention. She started to cast a spell and the other two drew their swords. "What is going on here?" a deep voice said from behind the 3 people. I had seen the group of army personnel approaching when they saw the possible altercation. Charla gritted her teeth in anger and cancelled her spell. The others put their swords away, and just to gloat I scanned all 3. The assassin was the only one that seemed to notice my scrutiny, and he eyed me like a cat, eyes a mouse. Charla Cotton, Chaos Mage level 18. Assassin level 12. Duelist level 13. "There is no fighting in town. If we catch any of you with bared blades or casting spells again, you will not be given a warning. That goes for you too as well," he said, looking directly at Fiona and me. "He stole my slave and I was just coming here to retrieve her," Charla said to the officer, pointing to Fiona. "Show me your neck, girl," the officer demanded. Fiona took off the poncho, showing that she wasn't wearing any slave collar. I could see Charla narrowing her eyes at me, probably wondering how I had removed the device without killing the woman. I then realized this put a large "kill me at all cost" sign on my back. "Looks like you were mistaken, move along before we toss you in cells." The 3 nodded to the guards and moved off. I could see Charla whispering into the ear of the assassin, and he broke away into the crowd and I lost sight of the man. "Not good." "Thanks, officer," I said appreciatively. "I have had a few run-ins with the black dragons outside of town and I can say that I don't much care for them. Yeah, well, we have an uneasy truce in place. They outlevel us but we outnumber them. And as much as I abhor slavery, there is nothing we can do to remove the collars. Try to stay out of trouble." I thanked the guards as they walked off to patrol the area. Turning to Fiona, I said, I think the assassin might be trailing us. She nodded once, tossing the rain poncho in a bin like it had murdered her only child. She really did hate that thing, I thought, smiling. Chapter 22, A Place to Rest. After the altercation with Charla and her henchmen, I decided to take Fiona back to my place. Well, mostly I tried to convince her to find some other place to stay, but she just kept saying that wasn't possible. She said something about her life bond and that she needed to keep me safe. Eventually, I relented, figuring if we were attacked that I liked my odds better with the two of us together. We made sure to keep our eyes open as we made the trip back to my place. It would be interesting to see what had become of my home in the 11 days I was gone. A change of clothes would be nice as well. I decided to put off looking for friends and family until I wasn't being hunted by a group of slavers, deciding the people I cared for might be safer that way. We made our way, stopping occasionally near patrols of soldiers to scan for the assassin. The absence of the man was making me nervous almost to the point I wished he would just attack us so we could get this over with. Then I could move on to doing other things. As we got closer to my house there were far fewer roaming patrols of soldiers, which wasn't surprising since I lived kind of on the outskirts. I did finally get to see my first active vehicle since the system came alive. The Humvee rolled down the street with a silent hum, turret manned by a soldier that eyed us warily as they passed. Wonder what they did to get it to run. Sounds like a Mana engine, Fiona said in reply. I turned to her raising my eyebrow hoping she would elaborate. She huffed at me but explained. Mana engines run on mana, of course, they can be powered by mana stones or mana hearts as well. They aren't all that powerful though, and only the rich in my world ever wasted money on the devices. Your soldiers would be better off with mounts like horses or lizards, although, they wouldn't be able to mount that weapon to any of those unless it was being pulled by a carriage. Yes, seems like a bit of a waste, but it's their money. I lead Fiona through a large warehouse type of building, that seemed to be abandoned. With its multiple exits I was hopeful that we could shake any tail we might have, by exiting in a random direction. We cut across to an adjacent building to see if anyone came looking. Sure enough, 5 minutes later a figure appeared from the door we exited. They looked around for a bit before turning back the way they came. Looks like we should be clear for now, I whispered. This hiding and running around is getting tiring. I wish to take the fight to these fiendish people, Fiona said angrily. Yeah, well, unless you think you can take a level 18 Chaos Mage on by yourself, you may have to wait a while. What? She's level 18. I had forgotten that Fiona didn't have the ability to identify people. I wondered about that, so I figured I would ask. Yes, and while we're at it, why don't you have an ability that can be used to identify people? I never needed one. I was a city guard, not some adventurer. This meant I was always in a patrol group, where at least one person had the skill. Plus it's not like I or my family had a lot of credits to spare. I have more money since coming over here than I have seen in my lifetime. I guess that made sense, it's not like they would go around killing people for the money or experience. That just brought up another question. Okay, well, how did you level then? Very slowly. Guards can earn experience from completing missions assigned to them. Usually, something like, arrest this many people or patrol this many miles. These missions didn't give out a whole lot of experience. Some people, like the commander, served in our military for a time, earning experience that way. Occasionally we would get sent out to subjugate monster nests and gain experience that way. I got a bit of a leg up. My parents were able to pool their money together, to get me a dungeon dive before I became a guard. For my age, I am considered a quite high level in my world. Really? I asked skeptically. Yes, most worlds that join the system are not as wild as yours. I expect that once word gets around, more people with the means will transfer over to take advantage of the easy leveling. Yep, that sounded like a recipe for disaster. We rounded the last corner and there she was, home sweet home. I was honestly surprised to see my house still standing and unmolested, unlike some buildings and houses we came across. Hell, even the doors were still locked. I guess it helped that my house was on a little used road and it wasn't much to look at. I pulled out my keys, glad they survived the journey, and unlocked the door. As we entered, my first impulse was to log into my computer to surf the internet. Weird how urges like that still existed. My next urge was to open the fridge and get a snack. Luckily I managed to prevent myself from doing that and stinking up the entire place. I can't imagine what the inside of my fridge smelled like after 11 days of no electricity. So this is your home? Yup, I know it isn't much but it is mine, well, I guess maybe if the banks were still around they might disagree, I said, chuckling. This house would be considered a large house in my world. Wait, those other houses we visited, were those all single-family homes as well? Yes, probably for 2 parents and a few kids, I said, shrugging. Your world is odd, even from what I have heard from other worlds. Yeah, I'm sure we are. Make yourself at home, I said as I started to pull some items from my pack. Fiona walked over. What are you doing? Setting up an early warning system just in case, I replied, hanging the chitin plates from the door. She just walked away looking through the house while I set up my traps. Is this your family? She said, holding up a picture. I stopped what I was doing to take a look. Yep, my mother, father, me, and my younger sister, I said, pointing to each. Do you think they survived? No, they died when I was 19 in a car accident. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know, she said, turning red from embarrassment. It's fine. I accepted their deaths long ago. I'm just grateful that they didn't have to live through this insanity. My sister may have been okay, but my parents would not have been able to cope. You mentioned parents, any other family back in your world? I have an older brother that joined the military and my parents are night retainers. I would have joined our military as well, but our military didn't allow women, so I joined the Royal Guard. My parents objected, but it was my choice. I was also betrothed to the son of some lesser noble, but he ended the betrothal when he found out I joined the Guard. Good riddance to the pompous dilettante, she said, disdain in her voice. My family managed to find another suitor to marry me, and I was scheduled to meet the man a few days ago, but as you can see I was transported to your world first, she said, not sounding all that sad about it. I got the sense she had a bit of rebellious streak to her. It reminded me so much of my sister. She turned to look at me. Why did you save me? You know why, I replied curtly, not really wanting to talk about it. Is that the only reason you rescued me? Yes, I added, not understanding what she was getting at. Although, now that I think about it, you do sort of remind me of my little sister. I swear the woman physically deflated after she heard those words. Thank you again, she said softly, for rescuing me and freeing me from slavery. I can never fully repay you. I wanted to say there was no need for her to thank me. I was being paid to get her to her destination. I felt it would diminish her heartfelt words, so I chose to remain silent. She walked into the living room and I moved to the back door to continue my preparations. When I came back, I saw Fiona practicing in the living room. I was surprised she hadn't hit anything and I watched for a bit until she noticed my arrival. Sorry, I was a bit rusty and wished to practice, she said apologetically, sheathing her sword. No, that's fine, but you may find more room in the garage. With the car gone there is plenty of space to move about. Thank you, I will do that. Which way is the garage? She asked, butchering the unknown word. Her butchering of the word reminded me of something I wanted to ask Frotsar but never got around to. You know, I never bothered to ask this before, but why does everyone speak the same language? There's an easy answer to that question, they don't. I'm speaking my native language and the system does the rest. There are some lower languages the system doesn't bother to translate, the Sulids battle cant for example. The more I learned, the more I found the system both fascinating and horrifying at the same time, with how it could alter worlds and people. Idly I wondered if my feeling about the system would differ if it hadn't been hidden from the world and I had grown up waiting for the activation day, like a kid on Christmas morning. The garage is right through here, I said, waving her to follow. By the way, how did your meeting go in the bazaar? Not great. They can only send one person over through the spatial link because of the expense, and he will be bringing supplies through in a week. That is when I am required to return with him to the barracks, she said, sounding melancholy. Well, I'm sure you will be glad to be back among your people and free from me. Maybe she would be ordered to stay with her commander. Not that I didn't appreciate her help, just that it still felt odd having someone that tried to kill you now trying to befriend you. It felt decidedly foreign to me. She just huffed. I can find the garage from here, she replied, stomping past me to the only possible door she could go through. I wasn't sure what I said to upset her, but I wasn't stupid enough to argue with the woman. Despite her life bond, she wasn't my slave and could do as she pleased, all except harming me, of course. I headed back into my home office. I had some rune work to do. The desk would make working with my new carving tools much nicer. I spent hours working on improving my craft, having schemed through the 3 books while Fiona practiced in the garage. I didn't have any specific need in mind right now, so I just tested combinations. My skills had improved greatly and I even managed to eke out a few more % improvements on my armor inscriptions. I also found out that putting runes in a Celtic knot pattern enhanced them a bit. I would have to play around with designs a bit more later. I decided to stop for now. Getting up to stretch and eat a snack from my cabinet. I grabbed one for Fiona as a peace offering. I needed her in a good mood as it was now time for me to do some practice. Despite her rather large lapse in judgment, she was still the best person I could turn to for practice at the moment. I knocked on the door to let her know I was coming in. I didn't need to be hit by a random sword slash if I could avoid it. I could hear her stop moving and a muffled voice say, "It's safe to enter." "Figured you could use a snack and a break," I said, handing her a granola bar. "Just tear the package open like this," I said, showing her how with my bar. "Thank you." I had ulterior motives, kind of wanted to test out my new skills, or at least one of them, not sure I have enough room in here to try the other out. She raised an eyebrow. "Did you not choose your skills when you leveled earlier?" "Oh yeah, I choose my level skills but I had 2 free that I earned for clearing dungeons." Fiona stared at me dumbfounded. "When did you have time to clear dungeons?" "Oh well, I cleared one on the first day. It was a level 1 goblin dungeon. You'll laugh at this next one. After you kicked me off the cliff I found a level 5 horde dungeon that I was able to clear. And for being the first solo person to clear them I got the extra skill slots." I decided not to mention the ability points I earned. A guy needed his secrets. "Every time I think I get a good idea of your capabilities you surprise me yet again." I only knew one person from my old world that had an, hear me, an as in singular extra skill slot that wasn't passive like your identify skill. As you can imagine extra combat skills are extremely rare. Sure you can use your class levels for non-class skills but that tends to reduce your class effectiveness overall, so most people avoid it. "Okay, good to know, just another thing to keep to myself right?" "That would be ideal," she said, rolling her eyes. "Let's see this new skill or skills, and don't tell me the names." "Here let's do this," she added flicking me a screen. I read the pop-up message. "Fiona would like to challenge you to a duel. This is a non-lethal duel and combat will end when one combatant reaches 10% health and all health is restored after the match ends." "In here? It's awfully cluttered and what about the bond, won't that interfere?" "In combat, it's important to keep track of your surroundings and avoid obstacles. And no, because this is a non-lethal duel that both parties agree to, the system will not punish me," she said smiling, her sword seeming to magically appear in her hand. "You seem to know an awful lot about how the system handles life bonds," I said nonchalantly. "Ahem, yes, well, shall we get started?" I groaned but pulled my staff from my ring giving it a twirl to check clearance. Most of my boosts were active as I had gotten into the habit of recasting them as soon as they faded. I cast Flurry and Aura Strike on my staff before clicking accept and a 5-second countdown appeared. As soon as the timer hit 1 I cast Blink Step. That's when I realized a fundamental flaw with the spell or with me. My eyes weren't fast enough to keep up. As I took the first step I blurred across the room towards Fiona swinging at where I thought she was but she was 3 feet to my right. The jerky movement also made me motion sick causing me to vomit a little in my mouth. I forced it back down shaking the dizziness away. I stepped towards her again, this time I was close enough that the blurring was reduced and I struck out with my staff. She dodged out of the way of my flurry strike and I spun the staff trying to hit her with a stunning gust. She just took the spell on her sword and redirected it back at me. "OSH, was all that came out before the attack hit me causing the stun to go off, just my luck." "You have lost the duel." "Well, that was embarrassing," I said, accepting the hand she lent me to get up. "Let me guess you lost sight of me for a bit." "Yes. It has to do with your perception. I'm guessing the skill boosts your agility." "Correct again," I said nursing my sore butt. "When a stat is enhanced so far over normal your mind and body may have difficulty adjusting. With your skill perception and agility are linked. Now that you know what to expect you should be able to compensate a bit, eventually, you should get used to the sensation. You could also raise your perception a bit higher to help you compensate faster. With or without my wind buff active." She sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose, "with if it was active at the time you used the spell." "It was active. Your buff probably exacerbated the issue. It's not natural for humans to be enhanced temporarily for 2 whole points. You are used to it now since you have been using that skill since day 1 and the enhancement of your new skill will become easier to handle with time. I would recommend avoiding the use of that particular skill for at a few levels at least in combat." "Yeah, I wasn't about to stop using a skill that could be a game changer, I would just have to practice more with it. It should be fine to train with it for now. Shall we go again? I accepted, and this time when the fight started I multicast 2 earth fists. She dodged the first one and I placed the second right where she stepped, causing her to lose balance, then I rushed in with flurry to take advantage, or so I thought. No, she had never lost balance, she had made it look like she had and managed to somersault over my staff, slicing me across the shoulder as I dove to the side. I hissed in pain, coming at her again. I did manage one sweeping blow at her midsection that connected, and it must have activated my impact ability because she staggered to the side, giving me an approving grin. Good, you're getting harder to read, now it's my turn, she said evilly. I groaned as she picked me up off the floor again. She had used an ability called Water Whip that smashed me across the face and left a groove in my wall. You still need to work on your feet placement and movement in general, you stand still too much, it makes you an easy target. This was much better training than what she gave me before we left the north. There she only beat me and expected I would get better or die, now she was actually commenting on my mistakes and how to adjust, and for that I was glad. We fought like this for another few hours and I even managed one victory during the matches when I landed a stunning gust followed quickly by flurry. That was when I learned just how useful my impact skill was. Turns out it had a 30% chance to activate on each and every blow from flurry, and although I didn't get any natural critical strikes during that attack, I did do over 560 damage with the one skill. I tried to multicast impact at one point, but the second spell cancelled out the first one. I guess I couldn't cheat the system on that one. I would have to try multicast on all of my spells eventually. Fiona congratulated me on my victory but told me not to rely too heavily on skills, instead, I should work on my actual skill with a staff. I asked her about that and she suggested I find a combat master in the bazaar. I guess I hadn't realized that I could find someone to train me there, but I guess it made sense if you could buy pretty much everything from multiple worlds there. After that, we decided to end the training session for tonight. I told her she could have the bed and I would sleep on the couch. I'm pretty sure it was just my imagination, or did she look sad when I said I would sleep on the couch? Definitely my imagination. Chapter 23, Midnight Callers. Something awoke me in the middle of the night. The room was pitch black and silent. Awaking like this had become a norm for me since the system came into being. Even in this so-called safe town, my nerves were on edge. I lay there listening to try and determine what had awoken me. There it was again, a light clank as the chitin plates knocked against each other. I pulled my weapon out of my ring and rose from the couch as quietly as possible. There was another soft clink from the back door. I glanced at my buffs, noting that second chance was still active for another 48 minutes. Good. That meant Fiona's was active still too, as I had multicast it after waiting for my mana to recharge before we went to bed. All my other buffs were down, so I started refreshing them as quietly as possible. With Fiona still in my party and within range, she would automatically get my area of effect buffs. I hoped that they would alert her to our guests. Everything was cast except my shield spell, as that emitted light when first cast. I heard a soft thud from the back door. They must have disarmed the trap. I decided not to play coy anymore, casting shield. Fiona, we have company. I yelled as loud as I could, figuring it would be better to make her aware of the situation than try to quietly handle it myself. That's when all hell broke loose. 4 men poured into the house from the front and back doors. 2 came at me and 2 went to find Fiona. It wasn't a large house and there were only 2 possible rooms she could be in. It was just barely bright enough in my house to see, my eyes having adjusted to the darkness, but it was enough. I cast Earth Fist in front of the first attacker's feet. Who would have thought having a house with no basement in the north would be a blessing? The man went down with a grunt and a curse, slowing down the man behind him as the hallway wasn't wide enough for him to go around. You'll pay for that, the man on the ground said. Oh, no, the man who came to kill me in my sleep, says I'm going to pay, boo-hoo. Whatever shall I do? I replied mockingly. Your death will be slow and painful, the man hissed, pulling out a dagger and in one fluid move whipped it towards my head. I jerked back, barely avoiding the blade as it flew towards me. It impacted the corner of the wall, causing the paint to hiss and bubble. Holy shit, that was close, I thought, recognizing the bubbling hissing sound as acid. The man must have some ability that allows him to coat his weapons in acid. I would need to stay clear of his blades. I backed up into the living room some more. As soon as the men entered the opening to my living room, I used flurry and blink step to cover the 10 feet before they could react. I don't know if these men thought I was a mage or something, but I could tell they weren't expecting my charge into melee. Using those spells left me with only 25 mana remaining, and unfortunately, I hadn't had time to cast Impact. It didn't matter though. The second guy had come around first. He must have been a decently skilled fighter because his shock wore off quickly. He managed to get his short sword up to block the first blow, but my rapid attacks overwhelmed his defense as I hit him 5 times. His arm lay dangling at his side, a bruised mushy mess of broken bones. He had used it to block the strikes aimed at his face when he realized he wasn't quick enough to parry the blows with his weapon. While this was happening, the other man took this opportunity to try and gut me from behind his friend. Only my armor, which I had worn to bed, saved me from the brunt of his attack. I stepped out of reach of the second man, snapping my staff around to catch the injured man in the groin. He let out a squeal of pain and dropped to the floor, his blade bouncing away. "Get up, you fool," the man who stabbed me said, growling as he kicked his buddy in the back. "That's cold, man, at least let the man cradle his junk, what little there is left of it," I said in a consolatory tone. The man threw another dagger at me, and this time I wasn't quick enough to get out of the way as it pierced my leg. The sensation of melting flesh is something I wish I could forget. I stumbled back as the pain shot up my body, the system doing its damnedest to mute the pain with my skills. I gritted my teeth and hobbled back another step. "You aren't going anywhere," the dagger-throwing man said, stepping over his prone friend, who was blocking the doorway, or at least that's what he tried to do. My banter hadn't been only to piss these men off, it had been to slow them enough for my mana to recover. I had just enough to cast Earth Fist on the prone man, causing him to rise in the air, tripping the other. As the dagger man lost his footing, I moved in, knocking him over the skull with a hard overhand blow. My leg was barely able to keep me upright. His body went limp and he dropped his sword. A few more blows finished him off. The other man, who I had sucker punched in the groin, had bled out from where the Earth Fist pierced his gut. The weight of the other man collapsing on top of him having pushed it through his skin. I stepped around the corpses and made my way to the bedroom that seemed too quiet, casting Rejuvenate. I knew the other men had gone that direction and feared the worst. "Fiona," I whispered while remaining far enough back from the door to attack anything that came out. "Paul, that you?" I heard her call back. She peeked out from the doorway, and when she saw me she smiled. I was more relieved than I thought to know she was okay. Well, that was intense, so I lost my train of thought, the white-hot pain erupting from my chest scrambling my mind. The look of horror on Fiona's face told me all I needed to know. The assassin had made his move. The blades withdrew from my chest and heart as I fell to the ground, a massive bleeding effect in my status bar from the attack. I was losing health fast and I had a 5-second silence effect on me, so healing was out of the question. Unfortunately, I hadn't rolled high enough on my luck check and my indomitable title failed to activate. "You have died." Death was weird, everything slowed to a crawl and became much more clear at the same time. It also felt like an eternity, even though less than a second went by before I got another message. "Second chance has activated. Indomitable has activated, removing the bleed debuff." Well, it certainly was good the title effect activated this time, or I would have just bled out again, my previous healing having ended. The assassin was fighting Fiona just feet from me and I had a choice to make. I only had enough mana for one spell, either heal myself or use my surprise resurrection to stun the man. As the silence debuff ended, I chose. Whipping my staff up vertically, I released a stunning gust at our foe. The assassin must have sensed something as he jumped to the side, avoiding the attack. What he didn't count on was Fiona redirecting the attack back at him. The man slumped to the floor and Fiona finished him off with a slice to his carotid artery and a jab through his heart for good measure. "Dying sucks," I said, falling back against the wall. I pulled out one of my health injectors and stuck it into my arm. Tossing that aside, I pulled out a mana one, doing the same. This was no time to be stingy, we needed to leave in case there were more enemies. We looted the bodies, finding a tidy sum of credits, over 3,000 in total. We took the armor, weapons, and another storage ring that the assassin had. As we left the house, Fiona took point looking out the back door. When she gave the clear signal, I motioned her to follow me. I circled the block with Fiona in tow and we ended up across the street from my house. "Why are we back here?" she hissed quietly, obviously not liking this plan. "They will never think to look for us this close to my house. It will fool them enough for tonight, then we can move on to another location in the morning," I said softly. It also helped that I had a key and knew that my neighbors had been overseas when the system came online. Fat chance they would be back, even if they survived. I opened the back door, motioning her inside so she could check for enemies. It was clear. I closed and locked the door, making my way to the second floor to watch my house. A few hours went by and dawn was just starting to break the horizon when I saw 3 more people creeping through my backyard. I spotted another 2 watching the front of my house from down the street. All 3 that entered left a few minutes later and the 5 started searching for tracks. They easily enough found the tracks we left in the grass and headed off towards the way we fled. Of course, they wouldn't find us since we doubled back on the sidewalk. It had been a risky play walking on the open sidewalk, but it paid off as we left no tracks for them to follow. We waited inside until we saw a guard patrol coming down the street. We stopped them, letting them know we saw suspicious activity in the house across the street. A few soldiers went to check it out. They questioned us about the bodies and I told them we heard noises in the night. Then saw a group of 5 men leave the house and head off towards the northeast around dawn. I mean, it was technically true, and that's the best kind of truth. The soldiers let us go and told us to be safe, although I suspected that they thought we had something to do with the murders. The fact that one of the dead men still bore his black armband meant they were not inclined to pursue the matter too deeply. There was even a silver lining about the whole ordeal: the fight had brought me up to nearly level 10. The men must have all been higher level than me, but not higher than Fiona, as I still had my negative title. Fiona interrupted my thoughts. You should have all the money we found. What? No, you earned half saving us from that assassin. We can split it 50/50. You may need it though, for your trainer, and I would like to keep the storage ring if you would allow me. I thought this over. While the ring was quite a bit bigger with 5 cubic feet of storage space, she really did earn it. Fine, but from now on we split all credits evenly, and all gear. Deal? It's a deal, she said, smiling. It was good that she wasn't so glum all the time. She had a nice smile. So, where to now? Well, might as well head to the bazaar. I assume they are open 24/7. 24 what? She asked, confused. I chuckled. It just means they never close. We have 24-hour days and 7 days in a week. She just nodded, looking at me skeptically, like I had made it up. I honestly don't know, she said in reply. I have heard certain bazaars are open all the time, others close, for whatever reason. Wait. There are other bazaars. Obviously, there are hundreds of thousands of worlds connected to the system, not all of them trade through the same bazaar. It's one of the reasons my kingdom has to pay to bring someone over. I simply shrugged and started off towards the bazaar and downtown. Chapter 24, Training Montage. We entered the area around the bazaar as incognito as possible. My staff and armor were stored in my ring and I had put on a change of clothes. Man, it felt nice to wear clean clothes after so many days. Fiona had argued with me about storing her armor, but eventually, I won out, saying that there were enough guards downtown to prevent any shenanigans by the Black Dragon members. She also had a change of clothes, thanks to my neighbor's wife being of a similar build. The clothes were a little loose on Fiona though. There were really only 2 people we needed to avoid and they were easy enough to spot. Looking around, I didn't see the mage or her cohort, so we hurried into the entrance tunnel, being whisked into whatever space the bazaar occupied. I had asked Fiona about it after our first visit, but she didn't know much about how the building worked. I'm going to see about getting us some mounts with the coin from selling off our spoils from last night. You should pick up some passive skills for yourself. Mainly riding and mounted combat. While not as good as active skills, it will at least let you attack while on your mount without falling off. Meet me back here in 6 hours and we can leave together. Yes, ma'am, I said, giving her a slight bow and a jaunty salute. Wait, since when did she start taking charge again? Oh well, it freed me from trying to figure out what constituted a good mount other than the basic horse. The first thing I did was hit up Victoria's shop for the skills. I chuckled again just thinking of the name. I was still kind of miffed at the little pixie for not explaining the drawbacks to the skills I purchased, but she did seem to sell some stellar skills. I needed the 2 riding skills as well as an upgrade to identify so I could use it on items. I arrived without fanfare, asking the pixie if she had the skills I was looking for. I think that made her even angrier than my laughing at her store name the previous day. Eventually, she calmed down enough to say she did indeed have the skills. All 3 were relatively cheap as they were common skills, costing me 375 credits for the bundle. My next goal was to find a trainer. Turns out there were quite a few trainers, although I didn't find any that impressed me overly much until I ran across an old man standing on a carpet in front of a weather-beaten tent. The old man must have been pushing 90, he was so weathered. When I watched him practice in his stall I could see the fluid grace of his movements, slow and methodical. Not at all like the flashy and over-the-top movements the rest of the trainers were using to pull in respective clients. I walked up to his booth. "Greetings," I said, waving to the man who kept his staff moving almost without thought. "Greetings, young fellow. Are you lost?" he said with a warm smile. I laughed. "No, I was wondering if you could train me in the art of staff combat?" "Oh, by the way, I'm Paul, and what can I call you?" "Everyone simply calls me Old Man Trumbo," the man said before pondering my other question. The wizened old man said, putting one hand on his chin. His staff continuing its slow spin around his neck effortlessly. With the tiniest of flicks the staff struck out, stopping an inch from my nose, causing my heart to skip a beat. "And why should I teach you my techniques?" "Enlightenment of the youth," I said, trying to be funny. I didn't even see him pull the staff back, it was now spinning lazily in one arm. "Humor is good, it helps one cope with the horrors of life," he said, the staff coming to rest on the ground with a soft thump. I swear that soft thump radiated through my entire being. I was itching to use identify on this man, but I heeded Fiona's warning from the day before. "Very well, you made an old man smile, so I will teach you for one day. If you show promise, perhaps I may teach you again in the future. The cost of training will be 1,000 credits. I was going to haggle with the man for more time or a discount, but something told me if I did, this chance to train with him would be lost. So what if it was 3 times the cost of the other trainers? I agreed, following the man into his tent that contained a small training room. The man placed his staff tip down on the floor and walked to the back of the room. The staff stayed upright, perfectly balanced on its metal end. "I cannot teach you my technique, exactly. As it has to do with the flow of air and water, and I sense that your abilities lay in earth and air. I must have let my feelings show," as Old Man Trumbo replied. "Fret not, young man, I can teach you a suitable technique," Trumbo said, alleviating the sudden worry that I had wasted a large chunk of money. He proceeded to take off his shirt, leaving him in only a pair of loose ankle-length pants and sandals. The dude was all corded muscles, the only wrinkles he sported were on his weather-beaten face. "You may keep your shirt on if you wish, but it may be easier your first time with it off." "That's what she said," I spit out before realizing it. The old man stopped, seemed to ponder what I said, then laughed a deep belly laugh that I didn't think a man of his age could have conjured forth. Once the man finished laughing, he asked me, "Your weapon, may I see it?" I had no reason to deny the man and pulled the staff from my ring, handing it over to him. The man deftly twirled the staff, managing to stop it on a dime and switch direction. He then used it to vault into the air, doing a corkscrew flip, slamming the end of the staff down on the hard mat. I could hear the staff vibrating from the impact, but the man held on and used the added momentum to go into another series of moves. After a few minutes of this, he handed me back the staff. His staff still upright in the center of the room, as if unfazed by all the gymnastics happening around it. "It is an acceptable staff for this training, but I suggest you purchase a war staff. You will find it to be much more compatible with the style I am about to show you." I followed along as Trumbo showed me stances. How to set my feet, how to move with my strikes, constantly pushing my opponent, or retreating safely. Then he showed me how to strike out and angle my staff for the greatest effect. I practiced the moves for a few hours before he told me it was time to test my skills, to see if I learned anything. I fought like a madman, using all the moves and footwork he taught me. He easily blocked or sidestepped each attack with very little effort, pointing out mistakes and asking me to try again. After another hour of this, he called a halt. "You have improved much in such a short time. Keep practicing those simple moves, and the more advanced moves will come much easier when you unlock the intermediate skill at level 10. Just remember, there is no substitute for experience and training. The system may impart the knowledge of a move, but it won't tell you how best to employ it in a fight. Find me again when you reach level 20 and we shall see if I can impart more. Now be off with you." I did feel like my ability to handle the weapon had improved, and I bowed and thanked the man for his time before heading off to find Horace. After activating the token he had provided for me, it was a simple matter to find his stall's new location. "Ah, hello again, friend," Horace said with a smile as I approached his booth. "Here to buy today or to pick my brain some more?" he said, ribbing me. My heart couldn't take the thought of you going hungry for lack of making a sale, so I just had to return. Horace let out a rumbling laugh. "What'll it be today then? Staffs, I think I recall you asking about." Yes, specifically war staffs. A rare weapon those are. I do have a few though," have a look. Everything is rare when you're trying to make a sale, I thought wryly. After he filtered out his wares, a screen popped up showing me 4 options and a description of each. It even came with a nifty description of what a war staff was. War staffs are a standard length staff with one short bladed end and one blunt end and are balanced towards the center. Iron war staff, this staff is banded in iron along its entire length. Quality, average. Damage, 15 to 35 bludgeoning / slashing x2 critical damage. 300 credits. Okay, the first option was met, the only thing it had going for it was that it was cheap. I looked at the next one. Viridian war staff, made from lightweight viridian, faster and more flexible. Quality, good. Damage, 10 to 20 bludgeoning / 18 to 38 slashing x2 critical damage. 1800 credits. The second one seemed awfully expensive for what it could do, and I doubt the viridian was the same material as the viridian on Earth. Fast was nice and all, but that seemed like something a spear user would prefer, didn't seem like a good fit. On to the next. Tungsten war staff, capped on either end by tungsten shells, the blade is made from high-quality steel with a pole made from eldar wood. Quality, high. Damage, 18 to 40 bludgeoning / slashing x 2.5 critical damage. 2100 credits. Now this seemed like a nice upgrade, it was pricey though. Hey Horace, what's eldar wood? Eldar wood is strong as steel but lighter and more flexible. It is commonly used in high-end spears and other long-handled weapons. Then there was the last item. Collapsing war staff of frost, this staff is capped on either end by frost steel with the blade made from the same material. The weapon is enchanted with the collapse function, allowing the pole to shrink down to 2 feet in length, turning the staff into an improvised mace. Uses 5 mana for conversion. Quality, exquisite. Damage as staff, 15 to 30 bludgeoning / slashing 15 frost damage x 2.5 critical damage. Damage as mace, 10 to 20 bludgeoning / slashing 15 frost damage x 2 critical damage. 4000 credits. Now, I could definitely see the advantages of having a staff that shrank down to a mace for fighting in tight quarters. However, even with the magical enchantment, I didn't think it was worth the price. I also wondered if I could duplicate the enchantment with my runes, something to think about. At the end of the day, it came down to credits, so I purchased the tungsten war staff, giving it a quick test. It felt great. I decided to keep my old staff for testing purposes. Horace was nice enough to point me in the direction of a merchant that sold healing and mana items, so I made my way over there next. I picked up 3 more of each injector-style mana and health potions. They cost a bit more but were far easier to use during frantic combat. That brought my credits down to 575. After that, I decided to pick up some crafting supplies, uncut leather, leather string, rivets, and other odds and ends, spending another 300. Last I purchased a week's worth of trail rations for 25 credits. Looking at my remaining funds, I decided my spending spree was over and I headed towards the exit to wait for Fiona. I didn't have to wait long, and she wasn't hard to spot, holding the reins of 2 lizard-like mounts. They looked like miniature T-Rex, with wide squarish jaws and powerful hind legs. Their front legs were a bit longer than what I had seen on T-Rexes, and it appeared they could rest on all 4s if they choose to. They looked to be covered in a mottled fur at first, but as Fiona got closer I realized it was feathers. Each beast sported a saddle, and the beasts didn't appear to be as wide as a horse, so perhaps riding them for a long time wouldn't leave me bow-legged. Fiona handed me the reins of one and I kept my distance from its massive jaws and 2-inch-long teeth. Was all I could say. These are raver beasts, while not as fast as a horse at full gallop, they have more stamina for long-distance travel at a faster pace. These are also trained combat mounts, so that should help keep both of you safe. They have another nice quirk, they can be blood bonded to a rider. Just know that if you do blood bond with her, that you can never sell her. Why would I ever sell her? It's every boy's dream to have a dinosaur of his very own, I said, all wide-eyed and innocent. Fiona just rolled her eyes at me. To blood bond you only need to put a drop of your blood in their mouth. I was about to reach my hand up to its mouth and just cut my hand on its teeth, but Fiona grabbed my arm to stop me. Best to place the blood on a bit of food and toss it to her, they tend to bite unblooded people and you would be lucky to only lose your arm. Well, that explained the blinders over the creature's eyes. I took out a piece of dried meat and put a few drops of blood on it. I could see the beast's nostrils flare at the smell of blood and it turned its head towards me. I tossed the meal into the air and she snatched it up lightning quick. You are now blood bonded with this raver beast, would you like to name her? Oh, I definitely wanted to name her, but what to choose? Oh, I know Belladonna or Bella for short. I entered the name. What did you name yours? Oh, I named mine Yonel, it's the name of a mythical mount from my world, almost forgot. I also got these, Fiona said, handing me an odd-looking box hanging from a leather strap. It looked like the old animal cracker boxes shaped like a circus wagon. I assumed the leather strap was for hanging it from your belt or pack. Okay, what is it? Portable stable, similar magic to a storage ring but meant for living beings. It can store one mount with food and water for a week. Neat, pocket monster, I said with a chuckle. Fiona just stared at me vacantly, not getting the joke. I sighed, so much good material going to waste. She showed me how to fill the device and lead Bella into the box. It was pretty easy, just had to touch the reins to the box and poof. The device even removed the saddle and tack until I recalled her again. All of this must have cost a fortune, how did you afford it all? It did cost quite a bit, but turns out those assassin's blades were magical. If only slightly, and they practically paid for everything. Oh, by the way, here is your half of the remaining credits, she replied, flicking the credits to my wallet. I was surprised to see that my half came to 600 credits, so that means she had 1,200 left after purchasing all of this. Anything magical really did sell for a premium, it seemed. That was good to know for the future. So what are you going to do now? I had pondered this question for a few days, wondering what I would do after I finished my missions for the Commander and Frotsar. I knew one thing, I needed to level, and I wanted to work on my crafting and rune knowledge. There were enough people left in this town that if I got good at crafting, I could earn a decent living. Especially with the bazaar being here. Not sure, perhaps we can find someone who knows of a dungeon in the area we can clear. I need to increase my level some more. Or I could speak to the town representative to see if they have any work I could do. Seems like a solid plan for you, but what am I supposed to do? She had me there, I was still thinking of myself as a solo act, and with her bond, I doubt that was the case anymore. Well, I figured you would tag along, or you could wait here for your envoy to arrive. I can just imagine the trouble you would get yourself into without me to back you up. So, no, I won't be sitting around waiting, I will come with you. I shrugged, she would be leaving in a week anyway, as she had to fulfill her oath with the Royal Guard. Gertrude might know where we can start our search, Fiona added. I shuddered at the mention of the matron but knew Fiona was right, it seemed like the old crone had her finger on the pulse of the community, what little she had left anyway. So we made our way on foot to the market, it was much too crowded in the town to ride the mounts, especially since I wasn't that confident in my riding skill, despite having the actual skill now. While looking around I noticed something I had missed the previous day. The small crowds of people moving about seemed to be composed of many different species, less than half being humans. Now, I had noticed a bunch of different species the day before but hadn't realized the extent of the change. It was also easy to tell Earth humans, even non-human Earthers, apart from otherworld humans. The Earth humans seemed to keep to themselves and eyed most of the other species with open hostility. On the other hand, the non-human and otherworld pedestrians didn't seem to care as long as the hostile humans kept to themselves. I just shook my head, even after everything people still fell into old habits of fearing what was different. Most of the humans that showed open hostility, were likely to die off or join a human-only faction like the Black Dragon. At least I assumed the Black Dragon was human-only, I hadn't seen a single non-human in their ranks. If you can't adapt to a changing world it will leave you behind. That was true in the old world and is even truer in this new world. Chapter 25, The Matron's Task. We located the matron easily enough, well Fiona did. I was more curious about the market since I didn't look it over the previous day. The woman was in the same spot we found her yesterday. What do you two want? Did you get lost and need help finding your mommy? The irritable old woman said. Of course, the old lady focused all her vitriol at me and I smartly kept my mouth shut, letting Fiona answer. Greetings Matron Gertrude, we were wondering if you could point us to either the town leader or someone who might know of any local dungeons. I might be able to do that, what's in it for me? We can certainly pay for the information. Bah, I have little use for credits. I did hear an interesting story, stop me if you've heard it. About 5 dead men in a house to the east and one of them happened to be a Black Dragon member, she said, whispering the last part. See, the thing is they are a weed that needs to be plucked if you follow. Pluck 5 weeds from my garden and I'll get you your information. Now I had no qualms about knocking off 5 more black dragons, but this seemed like a big risk just to get information. I even have a location you can find the 5, you two should be more than enough to deal with the problem. Fiona and I discussed the proposition quickly before agreeing to the task. Good, take this and leave it in the building when you are done, she said, handing me a playing card with a queen on it. All this cloak and dagger nonsense made my head hurt, so I let Fiona get the map information, and off we went to slay some dragons. The building turned out to be a small warehouse with a large garage door that was closed, with a single entry door off to the side. What really surprised me was the fact there were no guards. My guess was they were trying to keep a low profile. It probably meant they were up to no good. I had an idea of how to easily deal with the men inside and shared it with Fiona. That's suicidal, and with your spell, I won't be able to get in there to help you before some recover. I winked at the woman, trust me, you haven't seen all my tricks yet. She groaned in response, replying, fine. I activated all my buffs and waited for my mana to refill. Pulling my new war staff from my inventory, I gave it an easy twirl, testing the balance. It was perfect, I smiled evilly. Time to rock and roll. I started for the door at a walk, then a jog, and then I burst into a run. Just as I would have hit the door, I cast Area of Denial. The door slammed open with a resounding boom as my spell took effect, forcing the flimsy metal out of the way, the metal wall around the door tearing away as well from my spell. The startled looks of 9 black dragon members awaited me inside the room. God damn it! I said, quickly surveying the room. Nothing is ever easy. Their shock wore off quickly, but I was faster, casting Seismic Strike. The room was small enough that the skill's effects covered everyone inside. I rushed towards the closest person that was staggered by my spell, which happened to be a woman carrying a huge 2-handed sword. My staff's bladed end blurred out, slicing across her neck. She had been unable to dodge or parry my blow as she was using her sword as a crutch to stay upright. Blood spurted from her jugular, but I was already moving on to the next man as they were beginning to recover from the stagger effects of my spell. The next man tried to raise a crossbow towards me, but I hit him with Earth Fist, causing him to fire off the weapon prematurely, the bolt ricocheting off the ground and through the thin metal wall. I hope Fiona avoided the wildly fired projectile, I thought, running full force into the archer. The blunt end of my staff coming around from my first swing, cracking him across the ribs, as he bounced away from the impact against my shield. There was a loud grunt and the man went down to the ground, his breath being knocked from his lungs as my impact skill activated. I took this opportunity to hit him with a stunning gust for good measure. It didn't stun him, but it was enough to take him out of the fight. Looking at my flagging mana pool, I decided to pop one of my mana injectors and cast Flurry, running at the next man. I ignored his slashing attack, the edge of his blade glowing red. When the attack bounced off my shell, it left him open for a full barrage from Flurry. His corpse flopped to the ground, looking like ground meat from the bladed end of my war staff. I looked up and saw 4 men running towards me. I held out my staff horizontally and cast Blink Step, draining the last of my mana. Choo choo! I said, slamming into the group of 4 at high speed. The one I hit head-on was turned into a pulpy mess as my Area of Denial absorbed the impact. I broke the arm of another, and a third took a belly slash. The 4th one had enough dexterity to dodge my charge. I continued my forward run until I was near the opposite wall from the entrance. I still had 10 seconds left on my skill, and I used the time to clear my head from the mana withdrawal headache and the use of Blink Step. The remaining members started approaching me, smiles on their faces, realizing I had blown my wad and would soon fall. That was if I didn't have backup. Fiona chose that time to come in from behind them and easily killed the large sword-wielding woman, who had yet to die from her neck wound. A few of the enemies started to turn towards her and I popped another mana booster. The rest of the fight was a bloody blur of slashing and bashing. As the last 2 tried to flee, Fiona cut them off with an ability I called Shackle. I used the sharp end of my staff to finish them off before her spell effect ended. Even though the fight had been chaotic and fast-paced, I had found time to use Identify. The enemy varied in levels between 8 and 10. If it wasn't for my ability to heal and the initial charge into the building, we probably would have died. You have reached level 10, modifiers increased by 1, 2 free skill slots available. 5 free attribute points available. At first, I was put off not seeing the upgrade for my staff skill, but then I remembered that I filtered my passive skills. A quick check of my full skill list showed it at the bottom. I put 2 of the stat points in intelligence, 1 in agility, and 2 in perception to try and reduce the effects of Blink Step. We quickly looted the bodies, getting a bunch of weapons and armor. No storage items or magical gear, unfortunately. It seemed that this lot was rather poor as we only collected 300 credits from the 9 of them. I found one downside to the war staff: blood and lots of it covered me. While I tried to wipe off as much as I could, Fiona took a look outside. It's clear we should go before someone comes looking to see what the noise was about. Coming, oh wait, almost forgot, I said, stopping to pull the card Gertrude had given us from my storage. I set it down on one of the corpses and followed Fiona outside. We made our way quickly to another empty building, we located earlier to change out of our blood-soaked clothes. Going to have to get these washed, I grumbled in disgust. It was almost like this new world hated people being clean. Without thinking, I turned around, getting an eyeful of Fiona, naked from the waist up. I was so surprised I didn't look away immediately. When my brain finally kicked back and I averted my gaze. She must not have seen me looking, I thought, hearing no rebuke from the austere woman, not knowing why she just didn't change in the other room. Not that she had anything to be ashamed about. She was fit, with just a hint of muscle showing in her lithe physique. And she had ample enough assets up top, without being burdensome, at least they looked that way from the side. Oh God, my face is bright red, wasn't it? Sure as hell felt like it was. You ready to go? Fiona said a few minutes later, now sporting a sundress. My face had finally returned to normal after I got a bit of fresh air. Gotta say, she looked good in a sundress. 1 minute, I leveled up and need to pick my skills. She just nodded. I looked at my available skill options. Elemental Defense, boosts elemental resistance by 20% for 30 minutes for an ally within 20m, cost 75 mana, cooldown 15 minutes. Godly Might, increases your strength by 100% for 30 SEC, cost 100 mana, cooldown 1 day. Eye of the Storm, staff only, you spin your staff causing howling winds to surround you in a 10m area dealing 15 damage per second, cost 50 mana to activate, 25 mana to maintain spell past the first second, cooldown 1 HOUR. The system sure did want me to take elemental attacks and defense, but I had yet to run into anything magical that dealt elemental damage other than that one staff I looked at, or that mage. No, I was skipping that spell for now and taking Godly Might, an Eye of the Storm, despite the long cooldown that Godly Might had. With multicast it wasn't a big deal if I needed to double down on the spell in a short time. Thinking about that, I decided to see what my stats were at now. Strength, 12, plus 2, modifier x11. Endurance, 16, modifier x29. Agility, 15, plus 2, modifier x11. Perception, 15, modifier x11. Intelligence, 19, modifier x29. Wisdom, 14, modifier x11. Charisma, 11, modifier x11. Luck, 14, modifier x11. HP, 464, 510. Mana, 551. Mana Rigon, M154. I was glad to finally have my mana above 500. That last battle had shown me just how fast I could burn through my mana pool, and I didn't even use multicast. I made a mental note to get even more mana restoration items. Maybe even an improved one that restored more than the 100 that my original ones did. After changing, we made our way back to the matron for our reward. It better be worth it, I silently grumbled. Back so soon, were the weeds too much for you, the decrepit old hag said, poking at my soul with each barbed word. Each time I spoke with this woman, I liked her a little less. So, I made one little faux pas. Is she never going to forgive me? We finished weeding, but there were more weeds than you said there should have been. It almost cost us dearly. Fiona said, even her tone was starting to be less enthusiastic with the old woman. Well, all the better, my garden will be free from weeds longer. As promised, she said, handing Fiona a rolled up paper, go talk to Sergeant Cunningham at the army headquarters, if you could call that building a headquarters. Now be off with you, I have other pressing matters to attend to. Fiona bid her a good day and we quickly left the crotchety old hag behind. We found a place to sit, away from the crowds, to go over the map. It was rough, with an estimated distance and general direction for 2 dungeons. One was level 9 and the other was level 14, there was no other information on them. She fleeced us, I said in indignation, ready to get back up and give that old prude a piece of my mind, but Fiona held me back. Please sit down and stop making a scene. We got more than she promised us. Remember, we only asked if she knew someone who knew about dungeons. Instead, we got locations, even if they aren't exact. So do you want to go meet with this sergeant or go monster hunting first? First, I need to resupply, that fight drained my resources. Then let's go talk to the sergeant since we're in town. It didn't take me long to find a local vendor that sold improved mana potions. They were even cheaper than the bazaar ones since they came from locally sourced ingredients. Apparently, the local flora had mutated as well, and one enterprising alchemist managed to come up with a workable potion. I hadn't even noticed the change in plants. To be fair, I wasn't much of an outdoorsman prior. I only knew a few basic trees and plants, mostly ones to stay away from. I purchased 6 of the improved potions for 50 each and the 3 mana injectors she had for another 85. The improved mana potions could restore 175 mana versus the 100 of the injector. They weren't ideal for most combat situations, but I think I could make them work. Chapter 26, Draft Dodger. It didn't take Fiona and me long to find the army headquarters. I think it was all the soldiers outside that kind of gave it away. No, maybe it was the massive dirt-filled sandbag walls, if you could call massive cubes of material filled with dirt sandbags. I assumed they used dirt instead of sand since it was easier to come by. I was honestly impressed. How had they managed to move all these massive walls into place and fill them? Turns out that was an easily answered question. The heavy equipment moving around behind the wall kind of gave it away. Looks like they had more mana engines for those as well. As we approached, the gate guards stopped and searched us. Not exactly sure what they were searching for, as everything was inside my inventory and it wasn't like they could access it. After a quick pat down, they waved us through. I just shook my head in displeasure as they went back to watching the gate. I couldn't believe their lax attitude. We approached one of the few buildings within the walls, a single-story home. You could tell there had been more homes at one time, cleared foundations marking their recent location. I imagined they used some of the material to help fill the walls. I approached the door and gave it a few solid knocks. "Come in," a muffled voice said from inside. Opening the door, we stepped into the house-turned-office. At least a dozen soldiers were milling about inside. It looked like they were sorting and filing paperwork. I assumed the one at the small desk, facing the door, was who we needed to talk to first. "We're here to speak with Sergeant Cunningham. Gertrude said he might have some work for us," I stated plainly, dropping the old crone's name, to hopefully put some weight behind my request. "Please have a seat, he will be with you shortly," the man behind the desk said in a nasal tone. I'll be honest, none of the people in this room looked much like soldiers. I figured most if not all of them were reservists. For shits and giggles, I used identify on everyone in the room. I was flabbergasted by what I saw. Not a single one of these people was above level 5, and that leveling had probably all happened in the first few days. If this was what our defenders were working with, this town was probably worse off than I thought. Putting aside my worries, I sat down, and waited, and waited. I was getting antsy and angrier as time went by. No other people came in, yet the sergeant made us wait 45 minutes. I felt like I was at a doctor's appointment, having to wait so long. And was about to say screw it and leave, when Mr. Pencil Pusher at the desk said we could go in to see him now. Through all this, Fiona was unfazed. I envied her calm demeanor, but perhaps she was more used to the military bureaucracy. Walking down the hall, we entered the only door that wasn't a bedroom or a bathroom in the small house. After everything I had seen so far, what greeted us wasn't much of a surprise. Sergeant Cunningham was an overweight, balding, mid-50-year-old man. First I thought he must have slept through system activation, missing the opportunity to change his physical characteristics. I honestly couldn't think of another reason. Why keep the extra weight or the lack of hair? Certainly, he could have tweaked his body in the system to get rid of those features. I pushed those thoughts down. Perhaps I should give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was busy trying to help people at the time and couldn't be bothered with physical appearance. He didn't come off as your typical army sergeant. I had worked with a few in my time as a programmer. My guess was he was a reservist like the rest and just happened to be the highest-ranking soldier in this area or that survived the initial fighting. He had the generic class of fighter and was only level 4, lending more credence to the fact that he had been auto-assigned a class and stats. I wasn't sure how all that worked since I had finished my build. With his lower level, it was likely others did all the fighting for him. It made sense to keep the command structure intact. It was easy to tell the man had been out of service for at least a few years. His shirt barely fit and it looks like someone had let out the seams to even make that happen. I sighed internally. He wasn't the type of person I would normally associate with, but he was keeping the town at least somewhat secure, so I had to give him credit for that. The shirt reminded me of my patience and sanity at this point, stretched to its limit. I looked over to Fiona, trying to gauge her reaction, only to see a stony face. Curse her, I thought, making a mental note never to play poker with that woman. We took the 2 chairs in the cramped office, not bothering to wait for permission to sit. So, my assistant says you are here to offer your services? You do know we are in a state of war? Granting me the power to place this area under martial law. If you are a citizen you must join the ranks and help defend your country. I'll be the first to admit to not understanding every law known to man, especially military law, but this sounded like a load of horseshit to me. Look, Sergeant, we just came here to see if there were some odd jobs we could help with, not to be drafted into service. I may be local, but my friend here is not. I have the authority to draft you by presidential order, Cunningham said, a vein pulsing in his forehead. I guessed the man had gotten used to people following his commands without a second thought or any backtalk. You could certainly try, but I've seen what levels you have to work with and I would estimate my odds at better than 50/50, I said, a bit of anger in my voice. As if the government still held any power. Fiona just raised her eyebrow a touch at my exaggeration. Of course, she was right, even if I did have to flee from these people, for whatever reason, it wasn't like I was going to slaughter the lot of them. They were just trying to do what they were trained to do. It just irked me, it seemed like every idiot with an ounce of power now though they were king. Fine, whatever, Cunningham said, trying to calm my anger, we won't force anyone into serving, it's bad enough we get daily complaints about the Black Dragon and their slaves. There are only so many times you can tell people you can't do anything about them because of our non-aggression agreement. I could understand his frustration, he was playing a dangerous game and I decided to tell him so. You know that won't last forever? Once they have the forces in place they will attack. The bazaar makes this town too tempting a target for them to do otherwise. Even if it's only to remove a future threat. I know for a fact they are gathering their members before moving to Chicago. I can't imagine them leaving this city in anyone else's hands when they leave, not with the bazaar here. Well, that is a problem for later, Cunningham said, bristling at my tone. Right now if you truly wish to help we need trade materials, I can't afford to send out soldiers that could be put to better use protecting citizens. Okay, but this isn't a charity case, what's in it for us? I said, pointing to Fiona and myself. The sergeant must have been expecting this answer as he didn't miss a beat. We can offer you access to the armory, or any crafted items, for cost. What's in the armory? I asked. Mostly military-issue gear and the items we stripped from the dead during the initial days of fighting. I had to think about this for a bit. I doubted they had anything I would want, still, I wanted to help out the community since I intended to live here. Fine, we will agree to help, but we are going to need a storage item if we are to transport any significant amount of loot, I said, hoping we could get another storage item and not have to use my inventory. I will ask my assistant to see if we have anything that may work. Give him a few minutes, Sergeant Cunningham said, calling for someone in the hallway. We heard him relay his instructions to the other soldier and they raced off to go fulfill the orders. While we waited the sergeant asked us where we came from if we had information on the area and whatnot. I filled the man in on my story of traveling from the north, the barracks town, my fight with the Black Dragon mage, and my trip south. I left some stuff out, like Fiona's betrayal and my time in the dungeons. Mostly I told him about the enemy encampment to his north, which he wanted to know more about. I told him everything I knew and his frown just seemed to deepen. I just finished my retelling, when there was a knock on the door. Come in, the sergeant said. A soldier entered carrying a small bag that he handed to the sergeant. This was all we had in the supply room, it was overlooked because we thought it was a standard bag at first, the soldier said chagrined. Thank you, Private, you're dismissed, Cunningham said, waving the soldier away. Will this work? He said, handing the bag to me. I took the offered bag and inspected it, hoping for something amazing. My dreams of a massive bag of holding were dashed. It was a standard 3 cubic foot storage item, like my ring. It was acceptable enough for my purposes. Yes, this will work, I replied. Good, now before you go running off with the bag, you're going to have to form an agreement with me. To procure crafting supplies and materials in exchange for access to our armory and supplies. Isn't that what we just talked about? Please accept the terms of the agreement. Fine, I accept the terms of the agreement that Sergeant Cunningham has stated, As soon as I finished saying that, I got a pop-up window. You have entered into a contract voluntarily. If you fail to uphold the terms of the contract, you will be subject to a wanted status that will appear for anyone who reports to Sergeant Cunningham, as well as be subject to double damage from anyone in his chain of command. A bit harsh, I thought, but I wasn't too concerned. Not like I planned to take the bag and make a run for it. I planned to make this area my home, even after the apocalypse. Plus I needed to wait around for Frotzar if I wanted the reward he offered me. Even though Cunningham and I got off on the wrong foot, I still shook the man's hand when I stood to leave. Fiona mimicked a salute, not quite used to our style, but it must have been close enough as Cunningham returned it. It was time to start making friends and allies, and this was a decent start. Once we were outside the front gate, I turned to Fiona. Well, now that we've met the neighbors, how about we go do something fun? Our definitions of fun differ wildly, she said, shaking her head. We pulled out our mounts, getting a few surprised looks from soldiers and civilians alike as we rode off towards our first dungeon. Chapter 27, of Delving and Loot. We arrived quickly to the dungeon's supposed location, an area roughly 10 miles outside town. We decided to avoid any monsters on the way, which thankfully there seemed to be few of, this close to town. Surprisingly, riding the Raver beast was rather easy, and even with my piss-poor skill at riding, we made a decent time. Eventually, I got the rhythm of riding my mount down. It was much easier than riding a horse. I just had to adjust to the more upright position the beast ran in. The best part, I didn't feel like I had been beaten up during the ride, like the one time I rode a horse as a teenager. Well, we're where the map said the dungeon is supposed to be, but I don't see anything, I said, slightly annoyed. I guess we should split up and look around. You go right and I will go left. Meet back here at the stump in an hour. Sounds good. Fiona agreed with me, and we rode off at a slow pace, to try and find this entrance. After half an hour of searching, I finally located it. Hidden from view at the bottom of a short drop-off was a small opening, surrounded by broken blocks. I made an improvised flag to mark the location, out of a shirt and a stick I picked up from the ground. Bella kept an eagle-eyed watch while I set the flag, letting out soft clicking and mewling noises occasionally. After I marked the top of the hill, I mounted back up on Bella and rode back towards the stump we had designated as our meeting point. It wasn't hard to find the stump. The tree that had stood there must have been immense, the base a good 5 feet wide. As I waited for Fiona to return, I tossed Bella some food, that she easily snatched out of the air. With 3 bites she was able to swallow the large chunk of meat. I also took this time to go through the practice movements Trumbo taught me. I wasn't like I was any faster or more powerful than before. It was more like I could see an improvement in my ability to control exactly what I wanted my staff to do. My strikes felt more purposeful, more accurate, almost like the staff was an extension of my body. I only noticed this change due to my increased perception. I continued this practice until Fiona rode up. No chance of being unable to find this place. I could hear your grunting from a mile off, she said, trying her hand at sarcasm. I just mimed an over-exaggerated laugh while grabbing my belly, which caused the severe woman to snort in humor. We had both grown a little closer after the attack at my house. We had essentially saved each other lives now. Although, I was up 2-1, I thought triumphantly. What is this I hear? Has thou icy facade finally cracked? I replied in my best Shakespearean accent, which was honestly awful. But it got an eye roll and a slight smirk from the woman, so I considered that a success. Did you find the dungeon? She asked, trying to keep the humor from her voice. Yup, you ready to slay some beasts? She nodded once, seriousness returning to her face. I mounted back up onto Bella, leading the way to the cave. At the entrance, we stored our mounts. They would do us no good inside a dungeon, despite their supposed prowess in battle. I could tell this dungeon was slightly different than the previous 2 already. For one, no monsters were crawling around the entrance, which seemed to have man-made stone blocks littered around it. The second was the smell of death that seemed to emanate from the entrance. Ugh, that smells foul, Fiona said, trying to wave away the foul air. Of course, I had to reply, she who smelled it dealt it. It took her a few seconds to parse out what I said before she gave me a dirty look. I just shrugged and grinned as we entered the cave. You have entered the burial mound, level 9 dungeon. Recommended team size, 4 people of level 10 or higher, good luck. Well, that explained the smell. Damn undead dungeon, the thought of undead gave me the chills. I had always been creeped out by undead in movies. You sure we can handle this ourselves? Fiona asked after she read over the message. Yup, heck I could probably solo this dungeon if I wanted to, but it always helps to have backup. She just stared at me trying to see if I was being my usual flippant self, but I had answered her honestly. Of course, I was basing this on my previous dungeon experience. With my ability to heal and new skills, I probably didn't have much to fear from this undead dungeon. I also wanted to try something that I had wondered about since level 1. As we entered the first room, a rough dirt wall lay on the entrance side, slowly transforming into roughly hewn blocks of some grey stone, farther from the entrance. I could see scattered bones in the room along with a doorway on the far side. A bit of torchlight came from the hallway the door led into. Well, this is definitely different from the last 2 dungeons, I said quietly to Fiona, somehow not wanting to disturb the strange atmosphere of the place. From what I can remember, dungeons can vary depending on monster or beast type, she replied, hand on sword ready for anything to attack. I mean that makes sense for the centipede dungeon, but not the goblin one. She just snorted, that's because they were goblins, they will live anywhere they can and breed worse than rabbits once established. They likely defeated the previous dungeon inhabitants, making them the new dungeon monsters. That might explain the weirdness I experienced in my first dungeon, with only the final room being declared a dungeon. I was glad to have that inconsistency resolved, at least in part. A world with rules that didn't follow them would be hard to navigate. We should check for traps, Fiona said, breaking me from my musings. Traps? Yes, more established dungeons like this, with structure and possibly more intelligent monsters, tend to also include traps of some sort. I don't have any dedicated skills for locating them, so unless you do, it is going to be slow going. I shook my head, letting her know I didn't have any trap detection skills. While neither of us had dedicated skills, we both had a rather high perception and the first trap was pretty obvious. A thin wire strung across the doorway led up to a spiked log, hidden in the darkness of the ceiling. Step back, I'll trigger it with my staff. Fiona stepped back and I pushed the string down with my staff. A soft click was followed by the log swinging down from the ceiling. Anyone standing in the narrow doorway would have been impaled. As I let up, the trap began to reset, so I cut the string with the other end of my staff. The log flopped back into the doorway and didn't move. We were able to push past the deactivated trap easily enough, and once past we could hear the clack of bones, coming from down the hallway. A few seconds later, a skeleton holding a rusty sword shambled into the hall. I froze up for a few seconds, fears from my youth bubbling up at the sight of the creature. Before I came back to myself, I berated myself internally. I couldn't afford indecision like this, it didn't matter what I came across. I firmed up my resolve, pushing those old fears down. Hold up, let me try something, I said to the sword dancer, using Identify on the monster. Lesser skeleton soldier level 7. She acquiesced to my request, holding back while I cast Rejuvenate on the skeleton. I could see smoke rising from the body as my spell took effect, but I didn't want to wait the 30 seconds for all the damage to tick off on the creature. Next, I tried using Healing Touch. As soon as the spell landed, the skeleton seemed to glow brightly before disintegrating into a pile of dust. Well, that was quite effective. Kind of wish I had taken the Healing Aura spell now, it would have made this dungeon a cakewalk. Not sure what walking on cake has to do with having an easy time clearing a dungeon, but I agree, Fiona replied, towing the pile of ash that used to be a skeleton. She backed up as more skeletons started to enter the corridor. All yours, my lady, I said, with a bow. She grinned and sprinted forward, using her shackle spell to catch 3 skeletons in the doorway, preventing more from entering. It was easy to see she had never fought undead before. I guess I had never fought them before either, but I had a general understanding of how to defeat them from my gamer days, and so far that was proving true. First, she tried stabbing them in the head. Specifically, through the eye sockets, that seemed to glow with a green hue. This only managed to twist their heads and stumbled them back a bit. Next, she tried slashing the heads off. While this worked, sort of, it took multiple blows from her sword to accomplish the task. She took a few hits during this time, having to get in close to deal damage. I easily healed her of any injuries. Her next tactic was to lop the arms off at the joints. This was effective at making the skeletons easy pickings for her to hack apart. After she killed the first 3, she retreated to where I stood, panting slightly. This is much harder than it looks, she said, breathing heavily. Yet, it's mostly because you don't have the right weapon for the situation, let me show you. I cast Blink Step and rushed the 3 trapped skeletons. In a few seconds, they all lay scattered about the ground, in shattered bits of bone. I didn't even have to use any other abilities, just raw kinetic force from my strikes was enough to deal with the undead. That's not fair, I heard Fiona say. I scoffed, says the woman who can still beat me 9 out of every 10 duels. I continued my onslaught, clearing out the remaining 6 skeletons. As the dust and bones settled, we looted the bodies. Turns out bone dust was a crafting material, who knew? I tossed it into the storage bag. Fiona agreed to store the weapons, although they were quite rusty, perhaps they would have some material value. We continued into the next room, keeping an eye out for any traps. It almost wasn't enough, as I nearly stumbled into a pit trap. The only thing that saved me was a quickly cast earth fist, that I used to propel myself over the collapsing section of the floor. I took a bit of damage from my spell, as well as from hitting the floor and knocking the wind out of me. Okay, well, a bit more damage than I thought. I had to remember Earth Fist got a damage boost, and even though I suffered reduced damage from my spells, I still took damage. I got up, brushing myself off, and used Rejuvenate to top off my health. Then I had an epiphany. This was probably why I was offered an elemental defense spell as an option to take. So that I could fight without worrying about self-inflicted injuries as much. Then I groaned, it probably also meant my class had a lot more spells that had a chance of injuring me, farther down my progression tree. Seeing that I was okay, Fiona kept searching the room. We didn't find any more traps in the room or anything special for that matter, so we moved on to the next hallway. This one led to a 4-way intersection of moldy bricks and 1 flickering torch. Care to choose? I asked Fiona and she shook her head. Okay, right it is, I said, keeping with the always follow the right path philosophy of any maze. Before we left the intersection, I took out a piece of chalk from my bag, part of my crafting kit, and marked the wall with an X. Just in case, I said, seeing Fiona's curious gaze. As we walked down the new corridor, I used the end of my staff to tap the floor. I did this for 2 reasons, 1 to try and set off any other floor traps before we stumbled into them again, and 2nd to try and draw out any undead that might be waiting for us. I got no reaction from the first use, but the second was a success. 3 skeletons carrying shields and swords wandered into the hallway from a side room 20 feet up the hall from us. They clacked their teeth angrily at us and rushed forward, appearing to be steadier on their feet than their counterparts we fought earlier. A quick identify told me why. Skeleton guard level 8. We were no longer dealing with lesser skeletons. I hit the front one with healing touch and, although he glowed and smoked, he didn't go down with the 1 attack. So I hit him with an earth fist, forcing him into the 2 behind him. The second attack seemed to be enough and the lead skeleton guard fell apart. This is where things got weird. RPGs don't prepare you for the fact that bones get stuck in bones. And the dead guard's remains were hindering the movement of the other 2, as they got stuck in the rib cage and arm bones of the dead ally. Fiona used this opportunity to shackle the remaining 2. Turns out they didn't like this one bit, and I got to see them activate an ability. Both skeletons screamed silently as the shackles held them. They started to glow red from whatever skill they had activated, ripping Fiona's spell apart as they charged at us. Looks like they didn't care for that spell, I said hastily, readying my staff with stunning gust. The spell hit the one on the left, staggering him back a step but failing to stun. I wasn't even sure skeletons could be stunned. I would have to try it again and see, just not right now. I blink-stepped past the other skeleton, that seemed hell-bent on charging Fiona. My staff smashed into my target's sternum, or it would have. The undead was surprisingly quick, managing to get his shield up in time to block my strike. They were only skeletons though, and there was no weight behind the defense. My speed-enhanced blow knocked him flying 10 feet back and onto the ground, where he slid another 5 feet. My blow, even through his shield, had been strong enough to shatter his shield arm, sending the shield skittering off the wall, splintered and deformed. A look back showed that Fiona was easily holding her own against the last enraged skeleton. I hit her with Rejuvenate, just in case, and moved to finish off my target. I decided this was a good place to test Eye of the Storm, seeing as I was far enough from Fiona not to catch her in the spell. I began to spin my staff, imbuing the spell with the chanter words of power. It began slowly at first, a slight breeze, pulling up from the ground. Faster and faster the winds began to circulate, pulling my hair up like a vacuum but otherwise not affecting me. I couldn't say the same for the skeleton. As the skeleton began to stand, I could see the dust and debris start to be picked up by my spell, as it quickly grew in intensity. It appeared to take a full 3 seconds for the spell to reach its peak power. The damaged skeleton tried to force its way through the buffeting winds, only to be picked up and spun around me like the rest of the debris. I channeled the spell for 7 seconds, doing over 100 damage to the creature, which seemed to be enough to kill it. My guess was the impacts of it smashing against the stone walls had done it additional damage. The spell was incredibly draining, while not doing all that much damage to a single target. I could see it would be an effective crowd control device. As the wind died down, I turned to see Fiona, resting with a slight gash on her arm. Her wound was closing as my rejuvenate spell, still in effect, worked its magic on her. Her skeleton lay on the ground dismembered. I think I'm going to need some sort of bludgeoning weapon, she said, between breaths. Can you wield a staff? I said, remembering I still had my old one. She shook her head. No, I can only use swords effectively, although I trained with clubs, maces, mauls, and morning stars. Let's hope we run into something you can use. Fiona nodded and we moved on to check the corpses. The gear got tossed into Fiona's ring, the bones and powder got tossed into the bag. Another bonus, my Eye of the Storm spell revealed a cracked stone on the floor. After prying it up with one of the rusty swords we found a bag of coins. I was going to ask Fiona about them but she beat me to the punch. These are pre-credit gold coins. They can be converted into credit but their true value is to collectors. They will fetch much more that way. Well, that solves that, we find a collector to sell them to, I said, stuffing the coins into my ring. After looting we entered the room the guards had come from. It looked like a crypt, with closed coffins lining the wall to either side. It also screamed trap to me. Let's remain in the hall, I'm going to try something. If you insist, Fiona replied, backing out into the hallway. After we were both safely in the hall, I used my earth fist to lift the side of a casket. As soon as the casket lid came up the door to the room was closed off by a stone partition that dropped from the ceiling. A bit of greenish gas leaked out from under the door, causing us to step back. It wasn't bad enough for the trap to seal you in to starve, it also had to poison you. We backed away from the mist and continued down the hallway. We cleared away 3 more groups of guards. Turns out if you don't restrict their movements, they don't go into a berserk rage and are actually easier to kill. We checked each room they came from, with the same earth fist trigger. One room even took me 3 tries to find the one sarcophagus that was trapped. We cleared the last room on this hallway, finishing off the last of the guards. Being mindless undead, they didn't do anything surprising, allowing us to kill them with relative ease. Okay, last sarcophagus. If this one doesn't trigger a trap I say we try bracing the door with something and take a look inside? Agree. Very well, Fiona said, not sounding entirely enthusiastic about the whole idea. Can't say I blamed her. This was taking forever, since I decided to wait the full minute for my spell to refresh before using it again, instead of using my multicast. I wanted to avoid raising the mana cost of my spells. 240 would be a hard pill to swallow vs the base 60 if I multicast it twice. Heck, even the 120 mana it would cost if I only did it once. No, with an unknown dungeon I felt it better to try and save that for a boss or something. I hit the last cover with my spell, causing it to jerk up and over to the side a few inches just like the last 7. We waited for a few minutes and nothing happened. Well, looks clear, I said, accessing my inventory for something to use to hold the door open, just in case. I didn't have anything that would keep the door open completely but I had my old staff. Wedging it into the door frame as we entered the room. Fiona looked ready to bolt out the door in a heartbeat. I got the same vibes, this place was creepy. The one torch, barely able to cast light into the room, which reminded me I needed to get my flashlight fixed. The walls of the room were covered in mold and water stains. The corners and undisturbed areas festooned with spider webs and dust. I glanced into the first casket seeing that it was occupied by a corpse, holding something, but there wasn't enough light to see what. Help me with this, I said, motioning Fiona over and pointing at the cover. It took the 2 of us a solid 20 seconds to haul the massive rock cover away. Damn thing must have weighed over 500 pounds. That just made me more impressed with the strength of my earth fist spell. As the cover fell off to the side, making an awful racket, it revealed the remains of a robed man. I'll be honest, I was on a hair trigger and as soon as I saw the eyes start to glow I hit him with healing touch and rejuvenate. The figure wailed in torment as the healing energies did their work. Then he cast a spell on himself, cloaking his body in a dark aura. No, 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 you stop that now, I said, casting cleanse on the undead mage. He wailed even louder as the spell took effect and his body started to fall apart. Before he disintegrated completely, I used my identify spell. Corrupted undead priest level 11. Well, that was horrifying, I said flatly. I went around to the rest of the sarcophagi, repeating the steps for any that had a priest within. Turns out they took time to reanimate and I only had issues with the last one. It tried to blast me with some necrotic beam. Luckily the beam was easy enough to dodge as the top of his coffin was still mostly covered, giving the undead an odd angle to try and hit me with its spell. Hey, look what I found, Fiona said, pointing to the first opened casket. I walked over to take a look. Hanging off the remains of the corpse's belt was a flanged mace. Fiona went to reach for it but I stopped her. Let me identify it first. Oh, good point, she said, pulling her arm back. I used my identify spell for the first time on an item. Flanged mace. Quality, average. Damage, 10 to 25 bludgeoning x 2.5 critical damage. Not a terrible weapon, nothing special of course, but I was more worried about it being cursed or something. I handed it over to Fiona. It's just a normal mace. She accepted the weapon gladly, sheathing her sword that was starting to dull from all the blunt combat. I checked the rest of the items, finding nothing to be cursed, thank God. There were 4 more maces, some spell reagents, and surprisingly 1 silken tunic. The tunic turned out to be slightly magical, with a defensive enchantment on it. Justicar's tunic. Quality, good. Enchantment, mitigates 5% of damage dealt to the wearer. Fiona stuffed the weapons into her ring and I stuffed the tunic into mine. At least this explained why I had such an issue dealing with the last priest. The item didn't exclude any damage type, so it absorbed 5% of my healing magic. I wanted to study the item before we sold it. It wasn't the type of item either of us could use effectively since it took up our armor slot. I did try to wear it over my armor but it didn't add any effect to my stats. I decided to stick with my armor. This piece of gear seemed more suited to a caster. We cleared the room, packing the bones in the bag and heading back to the intersection, where we took the next right. The X mark was still on the wall so I had no worries of this being some labyrinth. It was more of the same, 3 guards per room, each room a trap, with a stairway leading down at the end. We decided to clear the last hall on this floor before continuing down. Again, it was a repeat of the last 2 hallways. With more entombed priests at the end, although, nothing magical on this end. We looted the room, coming away with nothing but bones and headed towards the stairs down. I checked each step before walking onto it for traps, which was a good thing because the 5th step down clicked and 3 spears shot out of the wall. One even skinned my arm as I wasn't fast enough to pull it back. You have been poisoned. You okay? Fiona asked, worry in her voice after seeing my pained expression. Yeah, just, damn thing poisoned me. I'll be fine after I cast cleanse on it, and I did just that. What I didn't expect was to wake up a few seconds later with Fiona holding me. What happened? You collapsed after you cast your spell. I can see you are still losing health, so it looks like it failed to work. I checked my icon bar and sure enough, the damn debuff was still there. I concentrated on it to see what exactly I was poisoned with. Healer's Bane Venom debuff. Using any healing or abilities to rid the body of this toxin causes you to suffer additional damage and resets the timer. Causes 1 damage a second, 4 minutes and 39 seconds remaining. Looks like my trying to heal it caused 20 additional damage and also reset the counter. I wonder if the damage was based on the mana cost of the spell. Doing some quick math, it looks like I would suffer a total of 315 damage, including the initial elapsed time before I tried to cleanse the poison, as well as the 20 additional damage I caused myself. It was a good thing I tried cleansing it early. Had I waited only a few minutes, the debuff would have killed me. It was a good lesson to learn. Always check the debuff before trying to remove it. Well, this sucks, looks like I just gotta wait for the poison to work itself out. Any healing causes me to take additional damage and resets the timer. I'll be fine though, got plenty of health left, I replied, trying to reassure the worried woman, who looked about ready to burst into tears. Chapter 28, Abominations. Just sitting there while poison racked your body for 5 whole minutes sucked, but at least I earned a title for it. Congratulations, you have earned the title. Grin and bear it, you survived a deadly poison, 50% less damage taken from poisons. Just once I wished a title didn't have to come with me putting myself in deadly peril, but I guess that's where the best titles would be earned. The rest of the trip down the stairs was uneventful after I healed all the damage and we exited the stairs into a large open room with 4 pillars. Each pillar had a lit torch burning and I could see something moving in the shadows beyond the light. Turns out this was a distraction. A freezing beam of blue light from the opposite side of the room slammed into me. You have been frozen, 5 seconds remaining. The effect of the spell encased the left side of my body in a coating of ice, doing a fair bit of damage to me. I could heal that, but the frozen effect was what really bothered me. Elemental resistance would have been extremely useful right about now. Luckily I could see Fiona had managed to dodge the attack. She was fighting off 4 skeletons that had rushed in after the spell was cast. 3 seconds remaining. 2 more skeletons were circling around to try to get at me while I was immobile. Fiona managed to shackle one of them. The other rushed at me and went for a swing of its sword towards my head. Less than a second before the sword made contact, the spell's effect finally wore off. I managed to duck under the swing, the blade cleaving a gash across the top of my skull. Pain bloomed in my head from the near miss, but I pushed through the pain. Carrying through my ducking maneuver, I twisted around, bringing my staff in a sweeping motion upwards, right into the skeleton's rib cage. The blow lifted the monster off the ground before cracking through his torso and separating the top half of its body from the bottom half. I staggered as blood poured from my head wound. Quickly I cast Healing Touch and Rejuvenate before returning to the battle. I cast Blink Step, avoiding a black beam of energy shot from across the room by what appeared to be a zombie mage. I used Identify to make sure. Putrid Undead Mage level 12. Geez, can't they just say zombie instead of putrid undead? Black, just the name of it made me want to vomit. I hit the mage with Healing Touch while I sped towards the trapped skeleton, shattering it apart with my blow. Critical Strike, you have dealt 373 damage to skeleton soldier. This was the most damage I had ever done in a single strike, not including my flurry, and the area of denial improvised attack, and I was pumped. Looks like I got a critical hit as well as having Impact activate to do that much damage. There wasn't much left of the skeleton afterward. It burst apart into bone fragments as my staff smashed across its chest. I could hear the mage wailing in torment from my spell, so I tried to shut him up with an earth fist. I took the moment's reprieve to shake off the lingering effects of Blink Step and ran to help Fiona finish off the last skeleton. I could see she was wounded as I approached, so I cast Rejuvenate on her. My health was still recovering from before, I was good for now. Fiona finished off her 3rd skeleton by bashing its head in with the mace, leaving only the mage. We approached the mage together. It was shaking off my spell as it attempted to stand. I didn't see the spell in its hand, but Fiona must have spotted it. The lightning arced out, aimed straight for me. Fiona intercepted it with her sword, reflecting it back at the caster using her skill. The desiccated flesh on the undead caught fire briefly, smoke poured off the mage. I didn't know how, but the creature still stood. I hit it with another Healing Touch and this time the undead glowed brightly, turning into a pile of ash. For a caster, that thing sure had a lot of health, I said, inspecting the pile for any items. I didn't find any. I scooped up the remains and tossed them into the bag. He must have been highly resistant to magic. Most mages are, since they lack the endurance, Fiona replied. It made sense. Otherwise, a mage of that level should have fallen sooner. My first 2 spells alone did over 450 damage, and I know the lightning spell did a significant amount of damage. He might have had a better version of the tunic we found earlier. I was hopeful as we looted the corpses. I was let down. There was just more of the same bone dust and some unknown goo that we had no container for. We searched the room and disarmed the one pitfall trap we located. I say disarmed, really I just broke the floor plate with an earth fist, revealing the pit of spikes below. There were 2 exits to this room, one on either side of a central altar, to the far side of the stairs down. Well, which way? Fiona asked, eyeing both gloomy portals. I say we stick to the same strategy and go down the right path, I replied confidently. I guess one way is as good as another, lead on. Before we headed down the corridor I tossed some bone fragments along the floor, which made a racket. Early warning system, I said simply. Fiona just nodded, mace in one hand and a pilfered torch from the previous room in the other. As we made our way through the filth-covered halls, the smell of rot and decay became stronger and stronger. I gagged a few times. Had I eaten anything in the last hour I would have thrown up. If it wasn't for the flickering torchlight I might have missed the next trap. A tripwire was hidden in the muck along the floor. A glint of light from the torch played across it just in time, allowing me to spot it. I stopped mere inches from activating it. Inspecting the trap, I couldn't see where it led to, or an obvious device it would activate. We chose to leave it be for now. I marked both sides with big white X's so we wouldn't stumble over it on our way back. The hall led out after another 40 feet, into a cavern lined with skulls and bones. It reminded me of the French catacombs. There didn't appear to be anything in the room at first glance. I took a step into the room, keeping an eye out for any more traps. I heard a clink when a bone fell off the wall. This seemed to start a cascade effect as more and more bones fell from the wall and ceiling. This freaked me out a little as I thought the room was collapsing. When they started rolling together to form something, I really freaked out. I tried casting Healing Touch on the pile, but it didn't seem like I could target it with the spell. So I hit it from below with Earth Fist, sending the bones tumbling apart, where they started forming two piles. Not good. I think this creature might multiply every time we break it apart, eventually overwhelming us with numbers, I said in concern. Wouldn't this be a good use of your Eye of the Storm spell? She was right. I had been so fixated on my fear of being trampled by the undead that I had forgotten about my AoE spell. Fiona stepped back, giving me the space to use my spell without harming her. I waited until the bone constructs started to form arms and legs, figuring they were nearing completion before I started casting. I was also finally able to identify them. Undead Abomination level 12. The wind began to pick up as the abominations lumbered to life. They stomped forward on thick legs made from many bones and arms, built like clubs. Despite their immense 9-foot height, they came apart in my windy vortex as they smashed into one another, the ground, and the ceiling. After 5 seconds I let the spell go, flinging the remaining bits against the walls. It didn't take long for 4 piles to start coming together, and I checked these as well. Yup, multiplying enemy, I said, sighing, knowing this fight was going to be a slog. Undead Abomination level 9. At least it looked like the more there were, the lower the level they became. You may have to fight more enemies, but at least they would be manageable at lower levels. Fiona took this opportunity to come back into the room and start smashing bones. I think you have the right idea, time to smash, I said, but of course she didn't understand the reference. Comedy gold wasted again, I lamented. I smashed the nearest pile of bones with my staff, using flurry. At least the satisfying crunch of bones made my mood improve. It took us another half hour to destroy the damn abomination. Even with the broken bones, it was able to reform into more and more piles. Eventually, there weren't enough whole bones left to support any of the necromantic magic that animated the things. To top it off, it only counted as one monster for the experience. Just like the previous skeletons, it only dropped bones and bone dust, just an extreme amount of the material. It all went in the bag that was slowly filling up. A quick examination of the room showed nothing else of interest, so we headed back down the tunnel we came from, making sure to avoid the tripwire. Once we were back in the altar room, we headed straight for the other path. Something caught my attention. I stopped and stared at a single lit candle on the altar. I was sure wasn't there when we left the room. Was this lit before? Fiona came back as she had continued walking, to look at the candle. I don't believe so. Do you think we activated it by defeating the abomination? That's what I'm thinking. See, there is a second unlit candle on the mantle, I said, pointing to another candle on the opposite side. See if you can light it with the torch. Fiona held the torch over the unlit candle and it refused to light, no matter how long she held it there. It also didn't melt one bit. Well, I guess that answers that, I said, frowning at the unlit candle. We couldn't do anything about the second candle. I figured once both were lit, it probably released some hideous undead boss. With the design of this dungeon, we would be forced to deal with it before we could leave. We would find out soon enough, as we were determined to clear this dungeon. The reward for the first clear was just too tempting. And that's what we did, another trap avoided and another abomination, that we were able to kill faster. Now that we knew what to do. In the bag, the bones went and we headed back to the main room to see what awaited us. Chapter 29, Crypt Lord. As we entered the altar room, we saw that it was covered in a hazy mist, obscuring most of the room. I could see the 2 candles burning brightly on the altar even through the mist, that seemed to swirl with every movement, almost clinging to our bodies. I was tense as hell walking into this creepy room, expecting the inevitable boss battle. I swung my head to the left, seeing movement in the mist. I stared at the space, waiting to see if I spotted it again. The room was deathly silent, like a shroud had been draped over it. I chuckled internally at that thought. Welcome, a raspy wispy voice said from somewhere in the room. The voice seemed to come from everywhere as it echoed around the walls. I wasn't able to locate the speaker as I frantically looked about the room. Back to back, I whispered to Fiona. Okay, but leave some space to maneuver, she replied as I felt her armor brush my shoulder. Oh, no, don't be like that. I get so few visitors. You came to play, let's play, the last word coming out with malicious intent. The voice cackled and the mist thickened into fog, making it nearly impossible to see. A sickly green ball of energy flew from the fog right at my face. I dodged out of instinct, realizing my mistake too late. The spell hadn't truly been aimed at me but the back of Fiona's head. Fiona must have realized something was amiss, twisting to the side to avoid the eldritch blast of energy almost completely. The armor on her shoulder had a slightly melted look to it after the blast schemed across its surface and flew ricocheting off into the mist. This foe was dangerous and cunning. We would need to be careful. A little heads up would be nice, Fiona said heatedly. Sorry. The quick apology was all I was able to offer the woman, another blast of energy coming my way. I yelled out a warning, dodging it easily. The crafty boss was waiting for that though, a bony hand shot out of the mist trying to grab my wrist. I pulled back on instinct, the cold that radiated from those digits leaving frost on my arm from just a brief touch. Okay, don't let Creepy McGee touch you, his hands are literally ice cold, I said, shaking off the painful numbness. My battle lust was rearing its head for the first time in a while. God, I missed this feeling of walking the razor's edge. How rude, I will have you know my name is R.A. I'm gonna stop you there, don't care. How about you be a good spectre and just pass on, okay? The rage-filled scream I got as a reply filled me with both dread and joy. The next eldritch blast came at Fiona from the right. She used her reflect ability to knock it away, but with no target it just impacted the floor, liquefying a small section. We can't keep this up forever, Fiona hissed to me. I know, I replied, trying to think of something to get the undead to show himself so I could target him with healing. Switch sides with me, I wanna try something. As soon as the next attack came in we both ducked under the blast and swapped positions. The fog was so thick I couldn't see the candles but I had a general idea of where they were and I swung my staff out to try and hit one. An angry hiss from the fog told me I might be on the right track. The hastily yelled warning from Fiona to dodge another incoming blast affirmed that notion. I was glad the magic he used was relatively easy to dodge or we might be in some serious trouble. I swung again, taking a step closer to the wall and this time my staff skidded along the top of the altar so I knew I was getting close. Protect me, I'm going to do something stupid, I said, not waiting for a response as I swung my staff a third time. Way! Time seemed to slow down for me as my staff impacted one of the candles. A loud boom shook the room, my perception of time returning to normal. The candle was unharmed but the shockwave blew the fog away for a brief few seconds. Unfortunately, it also left me a bit addled. I could hear Fiona yelling something that I couldn't quite make out. When I had the presence of mind enough to look, I could see a green sphere about to strike my torso. I also got my first look at our adversary. Forsaken Undead Crypt Lord level 15. The Crypt Lord was decked out in rotting robes with maggoty skin that barely clung to the creature's bones. It exuded such a foul presence that I gagged in revulsion. I quickly multicast Healing Touch on the Undead Nightmare and Rejuvenate on myself as the orb impacted my chest, knocking me to the ground. Multiple things happened then. I was cursed with necrosis which drained my endurance 1 point for 30 minutes. My chest started to burn as the orb ate away my armor and hit me for 186 damage, with added damage over time that lasted another 10 seconds, for an additional 3 damage a second. But the most beautiful thing that happened was the scream of pure rage-filled pain coming from the Crypt Lord. My dual cast spell inflicting their healing powers on the undead menace for 1.5 times their normal healing according to my damage notices. Crypt Lord takes 227 life damage. Crypt Lord takes 227 life damage. It wasn't over though, the foul thing still lived. While it was struggling to deal with its pain, I stripped off my armor and tossed it to the ground, where it continued to smoke. Fiona hadn't been idle during this time either. She had shackled the creature and attacked it multiple times with the mace. Unfortunately, she had to back away as it tried to grab at her and I could see a layer of hoarfrost on her mace. I tried to get off a stunning gust but the fog rolled back in, obscuring the boss from our sight again. He must have also broken free of the shackles because my spell failed to hit him. You will pay for that, the creature raged. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. Here, let me pay up. I think I have my wallet here somewhere. Sarcasm wasn't lost on the undead as he chucked another eldritch blast my way. I was starting to think this guy was a one-trick pony when I saw a cloud of pure darkness come towards us right after. Fiona grabbed my arm and we dived out of the path of the cloud of darkness. I swear I heard voices whispering from the cloud and I shivered. We scrambled back to our feet, not sure where in the room we were as the fog obscured the walls. Can you use your wind spell to chase this fog away? I could try, but I have a feeling this isn't a natural fog, probably an illusion or magical in nature, but I can give it a go. A quick glance told me I had a little over 380 mana. I hit myself with healing touch to top off most of my health and winced at the 80 mana cost because of my multicast effect. Alright, I can cast it for 4 seconds, but you are going to take some damage. Try to hold on to me. Fiona nodded as I began to spin my staff. Faster and faster it spun as the winds picked up speed. All the while Fiona held on and did her best to bat away the enemy's attacks. 4 seconds may not seem like a long time, but when you are standing there trying not to die, 4 seconds is an eternity. Despite her best efforts, we each took a blow from the malignant green light and our endurance each dropped another point. I managed to stay on my feet and keep the spell going. Luckily I was at full health, but the blow still hurt, hitting me for over 200 before the damage over time applied, which was over half my health with my loss of 2 endurance points to the necrosis. The wind was now buffeting us fiercely and I could faintly hear a shriek as a blur of bones and robes was tossed around in the maelstrom. The storm didn't push back the fog, but it appeared that the Crypt Lord had lost his concentration on it as it started to fade. I kept an eye on the creature as my spell ended, to see where he would land. I had just enough mana to pull off one more trick. I cast Godly Might and blink stepped, draining my mana all the way to 12. Before I could be overwhelmed by the surging headache from mana depletion, I sped forward. I brought a mighty overhead swing down on the creature as it started to rise. It tried to block my blow with its arm, but my staff bashed through the appendage like it wasn't even there, continuing on to the creature's head, caving it in with a resounding crack that seemed to disperse the remaining fog in the room. I had just enough time to see the damage notice before I passed out. Crypt Lord takes 304 damage. Crypt Lord reduced to 4% health, overkill activated. Crypt Lord has been vanquished. You have lost the title Team Killer. I awoke a few minutes later, my mana having recovered almost completely. I looked over to see Fiona sitting there. Were her eyes red? Wait, had she been crying? Our eyes met and she started to tear up again. I thought you were dead, you idiot. Stop doing stupid stuff like that, she said between sobs. I'll be honest, I was at a loss. I knew our friendship had grown, and I had forgiven her for attempting to kill me. She did after all save my life, so it was only fair. Of course, me being me, I had to go and say something stupid. You cry over all your friends like this? Only the ones I care for, she said quietly. Well shit, now I really felt like a heel. I mean, don't get me wrong, I liked the woman, despite everything we have gone through. Hell, maybe because of all the shit we went through. She turned out to be a stalwart companion and someone I rather enjoyed spending time with. I don't know if my feeling went past that point though. It was hard to feel more after your heart had been ripped asunder by someone you thought you cared for. I was pulled from my melancholy thoughts as the woman leaned in and kissed me. It was a kiss filled with all of her passion, desire, and need. I was helpless to resist, not that I wanted to. It turns out I felt a need just as great as her own. I had just suppressed it under layers of emotions I didn't want to acknowledge. A kiss is where it started, but our mutual need was too great to stop there. What happened after was a magical time, filled with a primal need for some connection, any connection between both of us. In the most romantic place possible, a dirty old crypt. Chapter 30, Morning After. I would like to say we were tough enough to spend the night in the crypt, but I would be lying. We got the hell out of there as soon as our needs were met. It was a little awkward, to say the least, but I can't say I didn't enjoy the experience. As we sat in our camp, I decided to go over the notifications I hastily forgot the night before. Fiona seemed happy but also lost in thought, so I left her to sort out her feelings. Congratulations, you are the first party to clear this dungeon. For this epic feat, you have been awarded one free skill slot for each member. For being the first group to clear this dungeon, you have been awarded 1,200 credits. You have earned the title Light in the Dark, 15% additional damage when fighting undead. Nice, another free skill slot and 2 titles all from one dungeon. Hopefully, the next one will be as rewarding. As for the loot, it was pretty shit. Mostly the bones we collected, the robes and mace. Heck, the end boss only dropped a necklace. A gaudy thing with a gold chain and a large ruby set to look like an eye. Turns out that's how the bastard was able to see through the concealing fog. Necklace of true sight, when worn allows the user to see through most illusions. Although a nice item, I let Fiona have it. It looked a lot better on her than it did on the Crypt Lord. The eye symbolism also reminded me of the Eye of Ra, one of the runes that I had been studying in my free time. I hadn't been able to make a working rune from it yet, but I would keep trying. I also took this welcome downtime to check my stats. While I didn't level, I was a hair's breadth away from 11. Probably one monster of my level would put me over. I cleared my throat so I could ask Fiona what she thought we should do next. Before I could even ask, she blurted something out. "I'm sorry, last night, I shouldn't have done that. I wasn't completely honest with you." She paused before completing her thought, "about the life bond." "What, you mean the fact that it means we're essentially married?" "Wait, you knew?" she said in surprise. "Well, not at first, but you were giving off enough clues that even my clueless self figured it out eventually. I know I was being a bit distant with you, part of that was from my mistrust of you," I said, but quickly added, seeing her tense up, "Don't worry, I think you earned my forgiveness by now. You did save my life. I just wish you would have told me sooner about the bond. We are both adults though, so I can't blame you for my actions last night. Anyway, I have a hard time opening up to people, especially women. My previous wife, sort of tore my heart out when she cheated on me with my best friend." Fiona was quiet for a bit before responding. "Yes, well, last night we kind of sealed the deal, so to speak." I just looked at her blankly. Perhaps I should explain. Life bonds are mainly used by nobility, to keep their spouses from any thoughts of turning on them. Since they marry for political reasons and not love. To make the deal equitable, the union has to be completed through consummation. At the time I thought it would be the best protection. You wouldn't need to fear me betraying you, again. Honestly, I thought you would try to have your way with me with the slave collar in place. Then the deal would be sealed and I would be safe from any more of your predations. I didn't expect to start to care for you. Despite your crass attitude at times, you do have a good heart." It was sadly true. Not that I didn't want people to like me. I was just rather blunt with people, most mistook that for rudeness. I believed in helping people, just not for free. If you did stuff for free, parasites would come out of the woodwork expecting you to do it all the time. Best to just weed out the chaff right away. "Wait, aren't you betrothed? How is that going to affect this bond?" "I am still betrothed. The life bond doesn't prevent me from marrying another. It is more like a commitment to each other, rather than an actual marriage." "Again, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have burdened you with this. I should have stopped you last night. Sex out of marriage in my culture is frowned upon. What we did last night shouldn't have happened, it only complicates everything. I thought you didn't wish to be married off by your parents." "I don't, but what I want and what I can get away with are two very different things. Now, even if they do marry me off, if my future husband finds out I am deflowered, I will be cast out of both families, and thrown to the wayside like simple gutter trash. Fuck 'em, I say, live your own life." Ah yes, such a simple-minded approach at life. Why not just have everyone rut around like stray dogs? "See, now you're getting it," I said cheekily. I wasn't going to hold her words against her, it was just the way she was raised. "Look, Fiona, you have one life to live and you should live it for yourself and not for someone else. I have feelings for you as well. While it may not be love. Who knows what the future might bring, and that's not something I say lightly. We may have gotten off to a rocky start. Well, mostly me as I tumbled down that cliff. Despite that, you have proven yourself to be a reliable companion. You saved my life, not once but twice. I honestly can't see someone else by my side for the tough times ahead. I always know you will have my back." "Oh, no, please don't start crying." "Well shit, now you did it, you big ape," I thought, kicking myself for my insensitivity. "I'm sorry, I'm just happy." I never thought I would hear words like those out of anyone's mouth. The most I could have hoped for in an arranged marriage was mutual respect. I felt a bit sorry for the woman, she was so starved for affection in her previous life that she chose me. I sighed internally, I wasn't good with this sappy stuff. I moved over to sit next to Fiona and just held her as she sobbed tears of joy. After a few minutes, she managed to collect herself. So where to next? I asked, trying to change the subject before another bout of feelings overwhelmed the poor woman. Well, you still need to level, we could run this dungeon again or head towards the next dungeon. How close to 11 are you? Honestly, one monster should put me over, and this dungeon sucked. Good, then let us roam around and hope to run into something for you to kill, and level, then we can try and find the next dungeon. When I went to get up she gave me a tight hug, almost like she was afraid to let me go. I was still coming to terms with my feelings, so I froze up for a second at the unexpected closeness. Eventually, I returned the hug. Feeling a weight I didn't even know I had, lifted from my shoulders. I had a lot of feelings to sort through. Did I want to marry this woman, or keep our relationship where it was? I was happy where it was. Sure, the sex was nice, but it wasn't like I was some hormone-riddled teenager. Plus I had been alone for nearly a decade, having abandoned dating early on after my wife's betrayal. I also didn't want to get closer to the woman if she was just going to leave in a few days. Maybe she would return, but she had obligations with the royal guard and with her family. Sure, I could go, but that would just make it more difficult for her to choose. I wanted to explore this new world. I would happily do it by her side, even if just a companion. I decided to table these thoughts until later. Right now we had monsters to fight.